Good evening, everyone. I am Chris, and tonight I'm actually really excited to do this. I'm going to be talking about a franchise of films which I don't believe I've talked about very often. I may have talked about it on my old channel, I think, but I haven't talked about it on this one yet. We're going to be talking Saw. We have a new Saw film out in a couple of days' time. It's out on Friday. I already have my tickets booked for it. Saw 10. Yeah, I guess Saw 8 and 9 were the spin-offs that they did, but we've got Tobin Bell back, we've got Shawnee Smith back, and I'm hoping we've got a Costas Mandylor coming back, because I believe I heard him in the trailer. I'm a massive Saw fan. It's a series of films that has been incredibly nostalgic to me, and I'm going to go into a little bit about that. I'm going to go into a bit of the history that I have with these films and growing up with them, and yeah, it's a franchise of films that's very near and dear to my heart. And I always get pumped and I always get excited when a new one comes out. Are they the best films ever made? Almost certainly not, but I do find them incredibly entertaining. And yeah, as I say, I have a history of them growing up, obviously I'm a 90s kid, but these coming out every single year. The big horror anthology almost, every single year, annual release of them, always in October. It was a good time. It was a good time to be a Saw fan, and what better time to talk about the franchise than when a new one's coming out? So we're going to be talking about all 9 of these movies. Now, unfortunately, I did actually want to. I haven't gone back and re-watched these in preparation for this. My time is incredibly limited now, and to get through 9 Saw films in the span of a few days is nigh on impossible for me at this point, unfortunately, because I have to balance so much other stuff out. But my memory's pretty good on the first 7 Saw films. Jigsaw and Spiral, not so much, but I'll do my best. I'll hold my own. We're going to be talking traps. We're going to be talking, of course, there's going to be spoilers, because all of these films end with a twist. Some better than others when it comes comes to the twist department. But we're going to be talking about everything. The extremely convoluted story and the lore, I guess you can call it, the Saw lore. Is that a term that's already been coined? That's an awful term, isn't it? But there we go. We're going to be talking about it all. Obviously, if you've seen the Saw films, if you're a fan of these films, hell, if anyone actually tunes into this thing, please do let me know your opinions on these films and give me your ranking of how you'd rank the Saw films. I might even do a ranking at the end. I'm going to try and pick my favourite trap for each film. Obviously, my memory, as I just mentioned, my memory is a little bit hazy on some of the stuff from Jigsaw and Spiral, but I'll do my best to give you at least one trap from each film that is my favourite. So yeah, this is just going to be a conversation with myself, but hopefully some people who tune in as well, who might share their love of Saw. And even if you don't like the Saw films, let me know why you don't like the Saw films. So, sort of my history with this, actually. Well, I guess we'll go into the first one now properly, won't we? So if we start talking about... Oh, all these are shifted for some reason. Ever the professional. Look at this. The first Saw film, there we go, 2004. Directed by James Wan and written by Lee Wanell. This was kind of like a passion project of theirs. They'd produced a short film that they really liked the concept of, and chose to make it into a feature, which had pretty much no budget. Like this, they had to make this thing on the cheap. This was made on a budget of around $1 million, which isn't much, and it ended up making $103 million. The very fact that it's predominantly set in a bathroom was to keep costs down of the budget and everything. They had one location, they had a handful of actors, and they managed to make this film, probably almost certainly unknown to them at the time, would go on to spawn 9 sequels and almost go down in history as one of the most enduring and beloved horror franchises there is. They just made it of an offshoot. Now, I think I watched this film for the first time when the first 3 Saw films had already come out. 4 hadn't been released yet. I think it was gearing up to the release of Saw 4, I believe. So the first 3 were already out, which would put this around 2006, wouldn't it? Which means that I would have been about 2006. I'd have been 12 or 13, probably, watching these films. My math isn't great, but I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of it. Anyway, when I first watched this film, I wasn't aware that there was a 4th one coming out. I didn't even know there were sequels. I used to go next door to my next door neighbour's house, and his older brother was a massive horror fan. and he collected a whole bunch of horror films on VHS, on DVD. He was an avid horror fan. And I don't even know if we just like picked one of the DVDs out of his collection and said, oh, you know, let's watch this. It was the severed foot on the front cover, I think it was. I don't even remember now. I'd love to sort of go back to that first time I watched it. I can remember vividly after it had finished, the film kind of rocked my world with the twist ending at the end. But I don't remember if he said, right, we're watching this film, or if we just kind of like went off on our own, picked a film out of his collection and just started watching it. But I was immediately taken in by this puzzle-like film. And I hadn't seen 7 at that point. I think the DVD cover does say like 7 has now gone to 8 or something like that, like a terrible catchphrase that someone had written for a review for the film. But I loved the puzzle-like quality of it. You had a lot of, at the time, sort of like online games, flash games, clearly that were inspired from this film. You know, the choose your own adventure kind of thing, and these puzzle-solving games to get out of a room and everything like that. Almost like an escape room, right? Even the concept of escape rooms remind me of Saw now. I've only ever done one escape room, but they are very fun. But I remember watching this film, and it just got to the ending, right? The ending, my expression mirrored that of Adam's character, Lee Whannell's character in the movie, where his jaw is just hanging open in disbelief that this is the guy. Because you're going through the film, and it's throwing you red herrings here and there, and I was a lot younger at the time, so I wouldn't have even known where the ending of the film was going to go. But you're thinking, oh, it's Danny Glover's character. Oh, it's Dr. Gordon. Oh, no, it isn't. Oh, it's Zepp. No, it isn't. And you're kind of going through the entire cast of who it could be. And as they're slowly, you know, and then Danny Glover's character gets shot and killed, Detective Tapp, and you think, oh, okay, well, it can't be him. And then Gordon saws his foot off, so you're like, well, it's probably not going to be him. And you're just constantly going through the entire cast. And then that ending where Jigsaw stands up at the end, and the soundtrack as well. I'm going to talk about the music. I may as well talk about it right now. Charlie Clouser, who's done the score for all of these films so far. What an absolute classic bit of music. I can't even count the amount of times that I've listened to Hello Zepp and all of its remixes and variations across all the sequels. Like Shithole theme from the third film during the flashback where they're setting up the bathroom trap. I absolutely love the score, and it is synonymous now. And that's honestly one of the things that I look forward to most, when that theme kicks in at the end. Regardless if you like the film or not, it's always so entertaining to me, and just I'm like, fuck yeah, Saw's back. But the ending just got me, and you know, Adam's screams echo into the credits, and then it kicks back in with the Charlie Clouser music, and I just remember just sitting there in disbelief, in absolute shocked silence as the credits rolled, and a twist had never got me that good in a film, and I'll never forget watching it for the first time. I loved that experience of that twist, and I was completely taken in. After that, the film just kind of like got into my mind, and I was talking about it to all my friends, because at school a lot of my friends weren't allowed to watch older films, and to be fair, like, my parents didn't know that I was watching all of these adult films next door. Sometimes I'd talk about it, and I'd usually get like a tut or a disapproving glance from my mother that I was watching all of these, you know, hard 18 films. And I was talking about it, and my mum's so squeamish. She was just like, oh no, I'm never going to watch anything like that. She fucking hates the Saw films. It's great. But I was just taken in by it, and then I think I went onto like Wikipedia or whatnot, and I started reading about the movie, and then I found there was a Saw 2 and a Saw 3, and to this day I actually can't remember where I watched Saw 2. I don't know if my next door neighbour had Saw 2 on DVD and I watched it there. SeaWorld Man says not full screen. Are you talking about me, or... Because I've made it to look like this, unless you mean that it's not broadcasting in 1080p, in which case that's a problem. But yeah, no, I've shrunk my webcam down to this size, so I've got the border, so it's all intentional, dude. Yeah, I actually don't remember watching. I don't know if I watched Saw 2 on. I'm gonna go back and just sort of like cover these films brief. Well, I'm gonna go back into more detail in Saw 1, but yeah, Saw 2. I don't remember if I watched it on DVD or if I watched it online somewhere. But watching films online at that time, it was so hard to find websites, and I don't even know if I was aware of websites like that at the time. I don't know if someone had. I vaguely remember like watching it on YouTube. I think someone had like cut the film up into like 10-minute chunks in like multiple parts, and I can't remember if I watched it like that. But I don't know. But going back to Saw 1, it's a film, as I mentioned, that after I watched it for the first time, I made all of my friends watch it. I was really kind of dictatorial like that with films, and in many ways I still am a little bit now. If someone hasn't seen a movie, I'm like, oh my god, you have to watch this film, and I'll try and make them watch it if I can. And I think, honestly, that's why the Saw franchise is so nostalgic to me, and a big part of my growing up at school and with my friendship groups is because this was like a rite of passage for us. All of us were watching Saw, and all of us got hooked on it. We loved the twists. We followed it every single year. We'd look forward to the next one. And I don't know if other people are similar to this, but Seawood Man says that's a big box. Yeah, that's the Mace of Sauron that I unboxed. I'm tried. It's there at the moment until I can find somewhere to keep it. What was I saying? Sorry, I got taken off it now. Yeah, we'd all watch these movies. We'd look forward to them, and for a lot of people, the traps were the big draw. But the first Saw film really wasn't that gory. It has gore in there, and it's pretty grisly. But a lot of it's off camera, and a lot of it's implied. It's still a grisly film to watch, but it's not as over the top or torture porn as the term was eventually coined. But I don't think Saw ever coined that term. I think it was the Hostel films that coined the term torture porn, which was then also attached to the Saw films, because I think they came out around about the same time. And the gore definitely ramped up, and the traps and the grisly ways that people would be killed was definitely more the focus of the sequels as they moved on, and they tried to get bigger and more grandiose and way, way more over the top from the relatively humble beginnings of the first Saw film, because it was never really about the traps. And I was never really interested in the traps, in all honesty. A lot of the Saw films, I just love the interconnected story, even though it does get ridiculous and contradicts itself as you get later on, and you have to perform massive leaps of logic that people can be in all these places at once and set up all of these traps. It's totally ridiculous. It's heightened. It's whatever. But if you're on board with it, it's great. And I love the flashbacks. I love getting flashbacks in Saw 6 that completely change the way you see something in Saw 3. Or even in Saw 5, there's a flashback that changes the way you see things in Saw 1. And as each film comes out, it builds the lore and it fleshes it out more. And I mean, they kind of have to, right, with Jigsaw, because they off Jigsaw at the end of the third movie. And there's a whole bunch of films that came out after where they have to try and keep Tobin Bell in the movie. But considering they killed off their main, their horror icon, their main draw for the franchise at the end of the third film, I actually think they found some pretty creative ways to keep bringing him back and to finding more parts of his story to tell. As I say, it does get completely ridiculous down the line, but hats off to them, especially around the time as well for these annual released horror films. Like, I actually felt like certain levels of care in the writing a little bit would take, at least more so than most horror franchises at that time. Some people say these are like really smart, intelligent films, and they're not. They're in the guise of trying to be intellectual. But I get a kick out of them, and I appreciate the effort, and you can tell that everyone's having fun while making it, and they were turning up every year. Yeah, it was a money-making machine, wasn't it? The only reason they were making these films was because they were making a shit ton of money, until they weren't, when Paranormal Activity came on the scene, and then there was competition every year, and then Paranormal Activity, the found footage movie, was the new thing that horror audiences gravitated towards, and people were looking forward to a Paranormal Activity film more than a Saw film. This first one's pretty special. It's low key. I love that it's low budget. I love that Lee Whannell and James Wan had this vision and got to make it. And off the back of this, I'm sure they were rubbing their hands together from all the money they were making from all of these films. their involvement was definitely more heavily in the first three movies, and I think some people would make the argument that the first three are the strongest. I don't know if I'd go that far. Well, compared to stuff like Jigsaw, Spiral, and Saw 3D, absolutely. But I quite like some of the other... I like Saw 4, I like Saw 6, getting into it, but obviously I'll rank the movies towards the end. Seaworld Man says, by the way, the chat box should be coming up. I'm not sure why it isn't. Let me mess around with this, see if I can get the chat box up to the top, because I like having you guys' comments in display. There we go. I'll see if that starts working now. Oh, hang on. Maybe it's because I got that. There we go. That should work now. Fingers crossed. Seawood Man says, really liked Spiral for what it was. Not too extreme for a Saw film. It's probably... Oh, God. It's probably my least favourite one, I'd say, overall. I guess we're going to have to see where Saw 10 goes and if it's going to tie in some way in a post-credit scene to Spiral, or if they choose to do a Spiral 2. It just kind of feels a bit pointless and taken out of the franchise a little bit. We'll get onto that later, though, as we move through them. I think the only things that let Saw down, but the first one down, but some people could argue that this is part of its charm, and it is kind of part of its charm, is some of the line deliveries in it, mostly from Cary Elwes, actually. And he's an actor that I really like. He's great in Twister, Men in Tights, of course, The Princess Bride. But I don't know, like it's mostly the scene where he gets the phone call from his wife and he hears that she's like a hostage and she's like crying for help, and he hears his daughter on the phone and he's like hysterically crying, but his acting's terrible. It's so wooded and it's so non-believable. Interesting, though, to see some other actors in there. You've got Michael Emerson in there playing Zepp. I know him as Benjamin Linus from Lost, which was one of my favourite TV series. Of course, he was in Person of Interest as well. Really, really good actor. And yeah, it's fun to see him in this. You got like Danny Glover in this movie as well as Detective Tapp, which is insane. So you got like all these people in there, and of course Tobin Bell just absolutely kills it. And fair play to him in this one. Pretty much had to do more or less his entire part in this role was to lie face down in a pool of blood, and that was it. But probably diminishing returns as the franchise went on. But he's always turned up for this. He's always been devoted to his fans, and you can tell that he was really passionate about this character and wanted to bring a lot of nuance to it. And I believe he had some input in the writing of the character, and he'd go to the directors and the writers and saying like, oh, I don't think John Kramer would act like that. He'd probably say something like this. And I think he even influenced some of the traps as well. He offered a suggestion on some of the traps to change the design of it a little bit, which they ended up going with, and it worked. So Tobin Bell is the face of this franchise, and he is the selling point of this franchise, and I think it's why a lot of people are really jazzed for this new one, that he's back. I mean, he was in Jigsaw, and they use flashbacks in that, and of course it was great to see him in that, and they're trying to work him back into the lore to, more flashbacks. What else did he get up to that we haven't seen before? But then Spiral, you didn't have him, and his presence, or his lack of presence, was very much felt. But we've got him back now, and he looks old as shit. And I know that this new one is meant to be set in between Saw 1 and Saw 2. You've got Shawnee Smith returning, as well as Amanda, who looks, well, she is middle-aged when she should be younger than we see her in Saw 2. So there are going to be some leaps of logic in there. Maybe someone can produce a fan edit of it eventually where they digitally de-age both of them, but I don't care at this point because Saw is so far gone, and I just want to see these characters again. I just want to see more Saw films. Seawood Man says, yes, Benjamin Linus. He is amazing in Lost. Really enjoyed seeing these different videos. Oh, really enjoying seeing these different... Really enjoying these different videos. God, I can't read today. Yeah, no, thank you, man. I'm glad you're enjoying the new videos. And, I mean, of course, I'm going to be going live tomorrow with JX as well for more Ahsoka reviews, but I don't get to the cinema very much now, and if I do go to the cinema, it tends to be for rescreenings of films. For example, next week on Monday, I'm off to see Rocky Horror Picture Show again. I went to see it last year on the big screen, but it's one of my favourite musicals, it's one of my favourite films, and yeah, like I don't know if you guys would want to see reviews on those. So, but I just like talking about things that I'm passionate about, and it's not very often that I get to talk about Saw, and I'm always going to jump at the opportunity when I can. So, yeah, I don't have a plan for this review. I'm just kind of running my mouth as I normally do, and hopefully something entertaining comes out about it. So, yeah. There are some things in this movie which later on in the franchise, I guess they kind of forgot to rewatch the first Saw movie. For example, there's the whole bit in this where Jigsaw says to Adam on one of the tapes that, you know, he's got to kill Dr. Gordon before 6 o'clock. I think it's 6 o'clock on the timer. And one of the ways that he can do it is to give him... No, sorry. It's the other way around. Dr. Gordon, he tells Dr. Gordon that he's got to kill Adam before 6 o'clock. And one of the ways that he can kill Adam is to dip a cigarette in the blood on the floor, because the blood contains like a deadly poison or something like that. And he's going to give a cigarette to Adam, and he's going to smoke it, and he'll inhale the poison, and it'll kill him. That's the idea. And there's a quote. Jigsaw on the tape says, "Smoking is harmless unless it leads to bloodshed." Bear that in mind for Saw 6, because that is going to be contradicted quite heavily based on one of the people that is in one of those traps. So Jigsaw actually says smoking is harmless unless it ends in bloodshed. There's other things that I've seen as well where Jigsaw is laying face down in this blood, so if it can be inhaled, granted by, you know, lighting it and actually inhaling the smoke, but if he's face down in this blood, wouldn't he inhale the poison, and wouldn't that kill Jigsaw straight away? There's other things as well, like Adam waking up underwater. Like, why, you know, how would he wake up underwater? My one thing that I can suggest from that is that, you know, he was probably laying in the bathtub and maybe his body slumped under the water, and that's when we pick up the movie. So I don't know if that's really a plot hole or an inconsistency like that. There's other ways that I've seen of how Dr. Gordon could have reached for the mobile phone. There's later on in the film where the mobile phone's ringing and he's reaching for it and he's going hysterical and he's clawing for this phone and he can't reach it and he's screaming, and that leads him to sawing off his foot in an act of desperation to try and get to his wife and daughter. But he's got this box which contained I think it contained the cigarettes from earlier in the film that he gets from behind the wall, and it's like, can't you just hook the box over, like pick up the box, turn it upside down, hook it over the phone and drag it towards you? But I've seen some people say, and this is a defense for a lot of the traps in these films that are really dumb and make no sense, oh, well, when you're in that situation and you're going hysterical, you wouldn't think clearly like that. I'm like, wouldn't you? I'm not too sure. But best trap from this movie. Right, I've got to cast my mind back. There's a really unfair trap in this movie, and there's a lot of these across the Saw franchise where I just think that either they're impossible odds, which are just really unfair anyway, and the odds are completely stacked against the victim anyway, right from the off. But there's one in this that I just think it kind of compounds on itself, the level of unfairness on this trap. And it's this guy he's been stripped naked, I think. He's been covered in this flammable gel, and he's in a room that is surrounded by numbers. Like, there is numbers written around the circumference again and again and again. There's millions of numbers on this wall. And there's a safe in the middle. He's been injected with like a deadly nerve agent or something like that, or some kind of there's poison in his system or something, I think. He's got something in him that's going to kill him, basically. And the antidote to the poison coursing through his system is in the safe in the middle of the room. The combination to said safe is written on the walls around him. So that I don't understand. It's like, is the combination to that safe a small fragment of the numbers, but he's got to input every single number to try and get to it? Is the combination every single number around the room? How does he know which number he needs to start with? Is there an arrow that says start here and end here? That's insane. I don't get how it works. To top that off, he's walking on shards of broken glass, so it's incredibly painful when he keeps walking around. Um, and obviously, as I mentioned, that the flammable substance, and all he's got to see the numbers is a candle, which, he's got to hold really, really close to him. And of course, it sets him on fucking fire and he dies. I think that trap is really, really unfair. I think pick one of those things. It's like, you have a deadly poison in your system, and the combination to it is written on the walls. But to do that, you've got to walk on broken glass. And it's like, okay, there's no flammable thing or candle or whatnot. He's just got to walk on broken glass. Like, that's still horrible in and of itself and really tough to do. Or do it the other way around. Just have it be like a normal floor. And it's like the combination to it is written on the walls around you. But be careful. All you've got is a candle and you've got a flammable substance on you. But there's no glass on the floor. Like, take one of those elements away. I just think that's really, really horrible. even in the grandest scheme of Saw traps, I think that's just really unfair. But my favourite trap from Saw 1, there's a lot of tests and stuff in Saw 1 and across the Saw film. So I don't know if you count the tests, like Zepp's test, as a trap, where it's like, you've got to murder a mother and her child to save your own life because you've got a poison in your vein. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily a trap or more of a test. If I'm going with just pure traps, though, from Saw 1, you've got the razor wire trap. You've got that one I mentioned, like the flammable substance one. You got the bathroom trap, obviously. I guess I've got to give it to the bathroom trap, haven't I? Because it's the most iconic one. They come back to that location multiple times throughout the films, and just seeing that bathroom set is so iconic to this franchise and to this film. So I guess I've just got to say the bathroom trap. I tell you what, though, Jigsaw went above and beyond with this one. The level of planning on this trap, he's got to put a box behind a wall. He's then got to plaster it over. He's got to retile it. He's got to put dirt all over it so it doesn't stand out. He's got to put the glow in the dark paint, the X on there. He's got to put the thing in the cistern of the toilet. He's got to chuck the key in the bathtub with Adam. All of these things, the poison in the blood. He's got to put the cigarettes in the box, and it's crazy the level of planning just for this one trap. And later we learn that this isn't even Jigsaw's first trap. It's not even like he's starting out. He has had a well-known career courtesy of films like Jigsaw way before this point, where he's done way more elaborate shit even before this point. Where he hasn't done anywhere near as elaborate shit as this point. It's been very brutal. It's been very, this thing will like fucking chop your limbs off, and that's it. Whereas this one's really drawn out, isn't it? But, Jigsaw's whole philosophy of putting people in traps because they don't appreciate their blessings, they don't appreciate their life, there's a lot of leaps in logic on that, and some just really fucking unfair ones, like, who is Jigsaw to decide all of these things, especially when you get to films like Saw 3, where he puts a grieving couple in a trap because their son was killed in a hit and run, and he's like, oh, they're grieving too much. Like, who the fuck is John Kramer to say about grieving for a dead child? Because, he did the same in Saw 4 and went completely off the rails. So, yeah, very hypocritical and things like that. And, I mean, he puts Adam in a trap in this because he's a voyeur. And, he makes money by taking photographs of people. And he's like, oh, you don't appreciate your fucking life. Then again, though, you could say that the original plot, when we get to Saw 3 and we see the flashback of him setting up this trap, we learn that, when he says at the end of Saw 1, like, the key to that chain is in the bathtub. He never intended for the key to go down the plug hole. Like, he said, put it around his neck, doesn't he? I think he says, or he says, put the key in there. So, in actual fact, if they'd have gone with Jigsaw's original plan, Adam would have woken up in the bathtub with that key automatically around his neck, which means that he would have tried his shackle, which means he would have got out of his shackle straight away. And then, I don't know, I guess he would have just gone for help and the entire rest of the trap wouldn't have worked, because Gordon's whole thing was that he needed to kill Adam. But if Adam wasn't there, because Jigsaw doesn't murder anyone, right? So just throwing the key into the bathtub and it going down the plug hole is a really, really unfair outcome. But I always interpreted that because it's Amanda who just throws the key in. She doesn't listen to Jigsaw. That's the whole point of Saw 3, is that she's putting people in unfair games, in unwinnable games. So if Jigsaw said, oh, make sure the key goes around his neck, but she just kind of throws it into the bathtub, that's on her. But I'm just thinking, what was his original end game then? If the key to that chain was around his neck and he just unshackled himself and left the building and got police involved, like, but where does that leave Dr. Gordon's game? Because then it's, you know, like, Dr. Gordon, your idea in this game is to kill Adam. It's like, who the fuck's Adam? There's no one in here. Like, it's all gone to shit. And then it's just between Zepp and Dr. Gordon. So I don't know. There's stuff in the movie that doesn't really make much sense when you get to Saw 3. I don't know if someone can explain that to me if I'm missing something. But I really like Saw 1. And still to this day, I think maybe for a lot of people, it's their favourite one. And quite rightly so. It's the one that's played the most straight. It was never intended to have sequels after it. Just the fact that it was done on barely any budget. And it got this kind of reception and it made that kind of money. The iconography from this film alone, you've got Billy the Puppet, you've got things like the reverse bear trap and Amanda in this movie, who is going to play a massive part in the next one that I'm going to talk about, and indeed the rest of the franchise. The music and just the identity of it, and cementing Jigsaw as one of the great modern horror icons there is in film history. So that's really cool that all of that came from this film. And there's probably a shit ton of other things that I haven't mentioned from this film, but I'm just aware that we're half hour in. I have shit to do tonight, and I've got another 8 films to talk about. So let's move on. My favourite trap from this movie, I'd say, is the bathroom trap, because it is just kind of like the selling point of this film, isn't it? We've got Carl in the comments. I don't know why the chat box isn't working, guys. I've got it on the order of things. It should be coming up. I don't know why your guys' comments aren't showing, and it really bothers me because I like that interaction. But I'm keeping an eye on them there at least. So even if they're not coming up on screen, I can see them. So yeah, we'll just we'll keep on trucking, and hopefully it kind of writes itself as we go through. Okay, next up we have, if I can get this working, bear with me guys, technical issues. There we go. Boom, we're on to Saw 2 now. We get a change of director for this one, but this director is going to be hanging around for a few Saw films. We've got Darren Lynn, is it Bousman? I think it's Bousman, isn't it? Darren Lynn Bousman. Written by Lee Whannell, so the same writer as the first one, and co-creator, obviously, and also co-written by Darren Lynn Bousman. This is where I think the Saw franchise really established its look and aesthetic and feel, and the pacing through the editing and things like that. And I think probably because you had this same director for this stint of films now, from Saw 2, Saw 3, and Saw 4, that big chunk of those middle films, where, you know, obviously when we get into Saw 3 and we get into the whole, you had like the pig factory and everything, don't you? The meat packing factory and the hospital wing with... so I think you just bring in a lot more of that iconography with these and that established visual quality. And also, fair play to them, bringing this film out 1 year after. That was the big selling point of the Saw films, and as I've mentioned already at the beginning, is another reason why I think I hold these films so near and dear to my heart, is because you had that annual quality to them. You'd always look forward to that next one. Every October you pencil it in and go, right, that's when the next Saw film's out. But as I mentioned, when I first watched Saw 1, I believe that the first 3 had already been released. So I think it was gearing up to that October release of Saw 4, so that would have been 2007, I think, wouldn't it? But as I say, I don't remember where I watched this film for the first time. I can't remember if I watched it on DVD or if I watched it in multiple parts on YouTube. I don't think I would have found like a streaming website back then, because I don't even know if I knew they existed at that point. So maybe I just watched it in multiple parts, because I have a feeling it was on YouTube back in the good old days of YouTube, where you could have a film on there cut up into multiple parts, because I think you had like was it like the 10 or 15 minute limit on videos at the time? And I think I did actually. I think that I watched Saw 1 on DVD next door, and I loved that film so much. And then I think I Wikipedia'd it and saw that there was a Saw 2 out there. and then I went looking for it, and someone had chopped it up on YouTube, and I don't even know if I watched it later on that day or within a couple of days after watching Saw 1, but I remember watching the first 3 in very close succession. Watching number 2, and I absolutely loved it. Again, establishing that twist ending to all of these films. And of course, these are all going to be spoiler-filled as well, so just be warned. I'm guessing you guys have probably seen all of the Saw films if you're watching these, if you're sticking around. If you haven't, I am going to ruin all of these films, so, don't watch anymore if you haven't seen all of these films. Carl says, the older I get and the more I deal with people, I feel myself side with Jigsaw more and more. Oh my god, I'm never going to get on the wrong side of you then, Carl. No, I agree. People are a pestilence. I don't know if I'd put them in a Saw trap though, but I'm sure we can all think of at least one person that we do want to see in one of those traps. Question is, which trap would it be? Or would you make your own? Let's get creative, guys. Let's get morbid. What would your idea of a perfect Saw trap be? I'm also going to ask the question at the end if you guys stick around. As I say, we've got a lot of movies to talk about and it's getting on, but out of all the traps across all of the Saw films, which one do you think that you could survive and get out of? Which one would you do? So Saw 2 does what a lot of sequels do, especially horror films. It's kind of more of the same thing, but it's bigger, it's more bombastic. There are more traps, there's more gore, there's more, there's a higher body count and everything like that. It's all of those tropes you come to expect from a sequel. You also have a Donnie Wahlberg in this movie, which is great, as Detective Eric Matthews. But I do like how you have a lot of characters coming back from the previous one. You've got Detective, it's Kerry, isn't it? Detective Kerry, I think her name is. I like seeing her again. And just getting more of Jigsaw, that was the big selling point for me. The best scenes in this film for me are where you've got a Donnie Wahlberg just sat in front of a table in front of Tobin Bell, and you're just listening to Tobin Bell talk, because he is fucking great. That reveal to him in the room. This is the one where the SWAT team break in, isn't it? And they're going up the stairs, and then he hits a tripwire, and the stair in front shoots forward and fucking breaks his shins, and his legs fold forward. Anything with bones breaking and everything, I get really squeamish at. I can watch any gory thing you throw at me, but anything with fingernails or compound fractures or bones breaking, which is going to take us onto a trap in Saw 3, which is probably the most brutal trap out of all of the Saw films. It just always makes me cringe every single time. It's that sound effect, But Tobin Bell is so great. And I do like that we get a little bit more of his character in this one. We learned that once he had his cancer diagnosis, he tried to commit suicide by driving off a cliff. And he sort of got impaled by a jagged bit of metal from the car. But he somehow survived. And from there, he appreciated his life, the life that he had to live, and he wanted to share that with other people by putting them through a gory thing. It's interesting at this point because he goes into his past, but clearly they hadn't written about his, about Jill Tuck and losing his son Gideon and all of that other stuff that transpired in all the other sequels where they kept constantly adding to the bad luck in John Kramer's life. But as I say, that's why I quite like these films, because they do find creative ways to keep building on his history and make him into a very well-rounded character. But there's a lot of history to the character. There are videos on YouTube of the lore of the Saw films and breaking down the timelines and when things would have happened, and a lot of things don't add up, but I always appreciate it. But it's nice to see the humble beginnings in Saw 2, from when they probably just had that simple idea of, he tried to commit suicide and he survived, and that was kind of the snapping point in his mind of his modus operandi, basically. Seaward Man says, don't want to be put in that situation. Well, neither do I, but this, we're talking about the Saw films. It's fine. None of us are going to be put in Saw traps. We're all good. Although Carl says that he's sided with Jigsaw, so I don't know. Maybe Carl's going to kidnap all of us and we're going to wake up in a bathtub somewhere. Oh God, I hope not. Carl says, same, I'd be the first to die in a group. Brinsley, congratulations, you are still alive. Most people are so ungrateful to be alive, but not you, not anymore. And then you gotta say, game over, bang. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that door, that sound effect, that sliding door. I've got to think that that's like a homage to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre with that sliding door. That sound effect in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre film is so chilling, and it's one of the most iconic shots in movie history, where Leatherface comes out and, you know, he hits the guy on the head with the fucking mallet and he's like fucking twitching on the floor, and he just drags him in and then and he just slams that. Oh god, that sound sends chills down my spine. And every time I close a door sometimes or slam a door, I'm always reminded of John Kramer, like, game over, and slamming the door. Brinsley says, I still need to watch Spiral and Saw 10. Well, we all need to see Saw 10 because it's not out yet, but I do have my tickets booked for Friday. I'm seeing it Friday night, and there will be a review, by the way, for Friday night. Do I have work early in the morning on Saturday? Fuck yes, I do. But am I going to stay up late and talk about Saw 10? You bet your ass I am. So, yeah, I'm going to be doing a live stream on that, and I'll be fresh out the cinema, ready to talk more Saw. Because I just love it all. We're not at Spiral yet, Brinsley, so obviously you can dip out once I do get to Spiral, so you don't get any spoilers and anything like that, unless you're not fussed about spoilers, in which case you can just stay tuned and hear me prattle on about Saw some more. Brinsley says, nails, eyes, and broken bones always freaks me out. Yeah, eyes as well, that's a good shout. There's the bit in Mission Impossible 2, random tangent. I love Mission Impossible 2. Everyone shits on Mission Impossible 2 and calls it the worst one. It's not. It's one of the fucking best. But there's the bit where, like, he's fighting Dougray Scott at the end, isn't he? And like the blade's like right in front of his eye. And apparently Tom Cruise actually did that. Of course he did, because he's a mentalist. And oh god, anything but yeah. Actually, speaking of eyes, that's a great jumping off point. This Saw 2 immediately sets the standard right from the off as to what kind of film this is going to be. This is going to be a lot more grislier, a lot more brutal. And actually, this scene's going to tie into Saw the final chapter. So remember this scene for later, ladies and gentlemen. You've got the guy in the Venus flytrap, which is a horrible trap. And if I was in this one, I'd probably just let the fucking thing close on me, because there's no way that I would do this. And he's got the scalpel. He's like, the key is right before your eyes. And he's got to, like, fucking gouge his eye out. Actually, I couldn't tell. He says that the key's right behind his eye, but you can see that there's, like, a deep cut on his eye. So I don't know if he can just sort of, like, open it up a little bit and just, like, reach behind and take the key, which is still really disgusting and fucking horrible. But I don't know if he's actually got to, like, full-on pop his eye out with a scalpel, in which case, if that's the case, then hell no. So just let it close. And close it does, because that is a thing that we're going to get into with the Saw films, in that even if someone's almost out of a trap, they're guaranteed to always die. No one really makes it out alive in these traps. Occasionally later on in the franchise, you get like one or two side characters that might make it out of there alive, but they know, the filmmakers know, you're just here to watch people die. And it's kind of cute for the first couple of films, but when you get into it, and it's just like you just know that all these people are lined up for the meat grinder, basically, and that's all you're going to be watching. But Saw 2 obviously does have a lot of positives. As I mentioned, the Tobin Bell stuff's great. Just hearing him talk and just watching him flesh the character out a lot more, getting more of the character. Sometimes less is more when it comes to intriguing characters like this, but I think with a character like this, it's just ripe to dive deep into his character. And Tobin Bell's just fantastic, so definitely the highlight there. I think the group dynamic is interesting. Certainly from the first film, you just basically had Adam and Dr. Gordon, whereas this one you've got like a full room full of characters. The problem with that is, of course, is that it's a relatively short movie. You know all of them are going to die anyway, so it means that a lot of them don't really get much character development. When you've got a smaller cast of characters like you had Adam and Dr. Gordon, you could do a lot of flashbacks, and, you know, I'm not saying that they're incredible paragons of character writing or anything like that, but you can do more with them, and I feel like that's where Saw 2 is very lacking. We get this entire room of people that I feel like we don't know. And this is a thing that Saw does too, especially later on. They tend to favour the group traps as the films continue. Certainly Saw 5 and Saw 6. but it's, sorry, I lost my trail of thought there. But it's like they will always kill off the most interesting character first. And one of the most interesting characters in this whole scenario is the character of Obi. I love that they call him Obi as well. I was like, is Obi a common name? Like Obi-Wan Kenobi? Like, what the fuck? But he's this really shady guy. And we learn in the film as well that, John Kramer says, oh, and Obi, thank you for helping me kidnap the others. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, this guy was in with Jigsaw and helped kidnap people? And we never really get much information behind that, but he's a really interesting character. The bit where Xavier threatens him with a knife and he takes it and he says if you're gonna threaten me with a knife, you may as well cut me a little. And you're like, oh god, this guy, I want to know more about this character. And he's the second to die in the movie, isn't he? I think Gus is the first one who dies. He turns the key in the lock and it shoots him through the eye. So Gus goes first. But we do see Gus in a flashback in Saw 4, and he was at the medical, the drug center where Jill Tuck worked at. So I do like that we get little flashes of the characters there, but we don't get much beyond that really. And yeah, Obi was a really interesting character, and I think he dies second, doesn't he? And the thing is, that is, in hindsight, that trap is so easy to get out of. You might get burned a little bit, I guess, but all he had to do, as you say, when you're in hell, only the devil can help you out, and there's the little screw to either turn off the flames or to open the door with a little diagram of the devil next to it, pointing twist here. So it's a shame, yeah, and then obviously because they kill off all the interesting characters first, you're just left with a bunch of characters that are just really fucking unlikable in this one. You've got Jonas, who's just terrible, Xavier, who's like this bro machismo fucking tank top wearing motherfucker. You've got Addison, Laura, I don't care about any of these characters really. Of course, you've got Amanda, who's, in hindsight, it's very strange that she's not throwing up blood every 2 seconds, but that makes a lot of sense when you get to the ending. But she's definitely one of the leaders of the pack in there, and she kind of takes Eric Matthews' son Daniel and tries to protect him throughout it, which is a very good thing, because could you imagine if he died? What if Eric Matthews' son had died during that? I don't know, maybe the poison got to his system a lot quicker, and he fucking died. That would really put a pisser, wouldn't it, on Eric Matthews' trap, where he says, if you just sit here, you will find your son again in a safe and secure location. Which I do love that, by the way, when he just shows up in a safe. I thought, Jigsaw's the ultimate troll. I like that. Lovely wordplay right there. But yeah, the amount of variables that Jigsaw has to juggle in his mind. And I know in Saw 5 they kind of go with it. He says, if you're good at anticipating the human mind, it leaves nothing to chance. But I'm like, come on, my dude. How could you? Especially after his death. And he's got concurrent games lined up during Saw 4. He's also planned and recorded the messages for and set up the traps for Saw 5. And then you've got the shit from Saw 6, which I guess Hoffman's setting up, but that's still tied to John Kramer because it was to do with the healthcare thing. And then you get the shit in Saw 7. I'm like, there is no way. There's planning shit out after your death and contingency plans and everything, but it gets really, really ridiculous pretty quickly. Let's see. Oh wow, there's more comments. Let me just see. SeaWorld Man says Tong 2. Yeah. There's a Tong trap in at the beginning of Spiral, which I'll talk about later on, which is pretty grisly. Brinsley, hell yeah, looking forward to your new review when ready, and I'll stick around for the Spiral talk, no worries. Yeah, some of the traps are just so unfair and cruel, and some are literally unbeatable, but they actually make a point of that in the story, but I'll let you get to it. Yeah, absolutely, especially when you get to Amanda and Hoffman, who are creating unwinnable traps. That's definitely the crux of it, and I do like that they addressed that, to be definitely. I'm trying to think of anything else to talk about Saw 2. I don't hate it by any stretch of the imagination. Again, they go back to the familiar location of the first one, the bathroom at the end, and then the Hello Zep theme kicks in. But there you get your glimpse. You've got the very heavily decomposed bodies of Zep on the floor, and you've got Adam as well. So it's very much revealed there that Adam never made it out alive. We will find out exactly how he didn't make it out alive in the next Saw film, in Saw 3, where we get the flashback with Amanda. And then we're hit with a twist at the end of this one, which again was very shocking to me the first time I watched it. And I think when I watched this second one, this just kind of helped cement my love of these films, was that you always have that twist at the end. You have something to look forward to. You're constantly trying to guess how it's going to end. And I didn't call the Amanda thing. I was a stupid adolescent at the time. I didn't know where it was going. So when Amanda was revealed as the apprentice, the ending didn't hit as hard as the first one, and I don't think any Saw ending is going to hit as hard as that first one. There are some very good Saw endings, though, I will say that, but nothing will top the ending to Saw 1. But this does kind of fall into the new trope, I guess, for the rest of the franchise, in that one of the twists that they love to use in these films is the new apprentice twist. And there's a lot of other apprentices. But Amanda was the first one that was revealed. Technically, chronologically, not the first one. That would go to Logan from Jigsaw, but we'll get onto him later on. And yeah, I guess Shawnee Smith doesn't really have that gravitas of as like a compelling apprentice. At least not in Saw 2. She's like, I don't know, how heavy would you say she is? She's very small, you know, she's very demure, and it's just like, oh, she's not very imposing, she's not very intimidating. She goes through a massive change between Saw 2 and Saw 3, and she very much feels like a different character come Saw 3, so I've never really understood that progression as to how she radically changes so much between Saw 2 and Saw 3, because I think someone said that the time span between Saw 2 and Saw 3 is like a month. Because Jigsaw's pretty fucking beat up, literally beat up at the end of this movie. Eric Matthews goes to goddamn town on him. He's like curb stomping the motherfucker. He's kidney punching him. He's throwing him around the room. He's like Batman in the Dark Knight. Where are they? And then there's also another twist in this movie, right towards the end. So you have the new apprentice twist, and you have this part of the film that you thought was happening in the present actually happened a while back ago, and they do that shit in Jigsaw as well, so that's another thing they like to do. And obviously the main twist in Saw 4 is that it's a midquel and it's not a sequel, although there's the autopsy scene actually happens during Saw 6, so that part's a sequel, but the rest of the movie is actually happening at the same time as Saw 3. I'm going to get onto Saw 4 because my mind was fucking blown when I was first trying to watch Saw 4. But yeah, favourite trap from Saw 2. Right, let me try and go through. So you got the Venus flytrap, very, very similar to the reverse bear trap. The aesthetic, the kind of green tint to the scene, and the fact you've got like this this snapping kind of big hulking metal device, this like big iron device thing. It's very similar to that, isn't it? So you've got that one. Obviously, you've got the main house trap, which we find out is actually part of the same house as the bathroom. But I don't know. I thought it looked really different when you see more of the house later on. But yeah, I'm not quite sure the architecture of that house. It's kind of crazy. That's a crazy fucking basement and bathroom system. There's, loads of labyrinthian corridors of smoking, scalding hot pipes, and then you've just got this random bathroom with a really imposing sliding door. Very strange. But I think later on in one of the other Saw films, we see it's like it's in this one, isn't it? It's like a fully furnished house. I don't get how it works, but there we go. What other traps are in this one? You've got the keyhole gun thing. That's not really a trap. That one's pretty grisly, actually. The one that the girl sticks her arms through, and it's got like the razor blades that when you push through, they just extend that way. But then obviously if you wanted to bring your hands back down, they're gonna like completely shred your fucking wrists and your hands. That's pretty grisly. And I like the lighting in that scene as well, how it's in this perspex box above her with a syringe, and as more and more blood's like coming out of her wrists, it's tinting the scene red. I thought that was quite cool how they did that, because the camera's sort of below the box. I think honestly it'd be the needle pick trap. The use of sound effects in that, and Shawnee Smith's scream, like her performance in that scene's really good. Absolute scream queen when it comes to that scene. But you've got like the glass of the syringes, and they're all fucking grimy and dirty and just Yeah, that's really unfair as well. Finding a needle in a haystack, she's got to find that key. And he always gives them a really unfair time limit. There's this huge fucking pit of syringes. There's like a million syringes in this thing. And one tiny little key. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to give you like 60 seconds. Right, off you go. It's like, oh, thanks. 60 seconds. Great. And it never seems like it's enough time. Like, even if you gave someone 5 minutes, I feel like that would be too short a time. But there we go. That's just me. This is why I couldn't be a Jigsaw killer, right? Because I'd be too merciful. I'd be too lenient with the timings. But that one sticks out in my mind as a pretty iconic one. And it's that initial moment where Xavier picks her up and just, like, yeets her into this hole. And when again, like, the use of sound effects and the editing and everything, and she's got all of these sticking out of her, like, ah! Like, so that one would probably be up there. I'm trying to think of any other traps in that film. I feel like I've missed out on a few characters. What's interesting is that there were probably like a bunch of rooms that we never even got to see, because the one girl, like the blonde, who's quite sickly, and clearly the poisonous gas has affected her a lot more, and she has like a fit and she dies, doesn't she? But I'm imagining there was probably a room for everyone. So there's probably more traps in there I haven't seen. Oh, and of course there's the furnace one, like the oven, isn't there, that Obi dies in? I forgot about that one. But no, Needle Pit Trap is probably my favourite, I'd say, out of that film. Let me just see. Brinsley says his plans are too elaborate and he knows how everything will play out. Apparently, it's easy to think of Jigsaw as a god. Yeah, pretty much, as the films go on. But you just go with it at that point. I think if you're that far into the franchise, you just kind of... you know what you're getting involved for. The leaps in logic and everything. But I still love them. I still love the films. I still showed up for them and everything like that. Brinsley agrees. Yeah, the Needle Pit Trap, definitely one that sticks with you. Good pun there, by the way. Love it. Which brings us on to our next film in the franchise. Let me just get rid of these. Boom. Saw 3. There we go. Again, as I've already mentioned, I believe this film was already out by the time I watched Saw 1. But again, I have no memory of how I watched this film. I don't think I watched it on DVD. I think it was probably on the internet again somewhere. This one... at the time, I don't think I enjoyed this one as much as Saw 1 and 2. And I'm not quite sure why, but it's definitely one that's grown on me. And now I by far, I like it way more than Saw 2. I will say that. This one definitely goes all in with the traps. When you watch this movie again, it feels like there's a goddamn trap every 2 seconds. They really just threw everything against the wall in this one. I don't even know if they thought this was going to be the last one, because obviously they just made another one the very following year, and there are some moments in this film that do leave things open. It does end on a sort of cliffhanger that could tee up for the next one, and there's scenes in this movie where if this had have been the last Saw film that they made, with the death of Amanda and the death of Jigsaw, you've still got moments where he's pouring the wax on that tape, and you'd be like, well, why is he doing that? Like, that never really paid off to anything. You'd have Jeff's daughter, who's still imprisoned, and setting up a film for him to, do another game afterwards. So there would have still been open-ended things like that. But I don't know. A lot of people that I talk to keep saying, oh, it should have ended at Saw 3. You got rid of Amanda. It tied everything up more or less, and Jigsaw died, and that was it. And I think they say that the quality of the films dropped off after this one. I don't know. I think it still hung in there a little bit with Saw 4. Not as good as these first 3, but I still very much enjoy 4. That's one that grew on me. I'd say that the quality dipped with a little bit with Saw 5. Came up quite considerably with Saw 6, and then dropped off a fucking cliff when you get to Saw 7. But we'll get onto that later on. Let's talk Saw 3 first. So, once again, Daryl Lynn Bousman. I never know how to pronounce his last name. Bousman. Daryl Lynn Bousman. Screenplay exclusively by Lee Whannell this time, and the story by Lee Whannell and James Wan. So, still very much those original creators tied to this movie. We get a lot of flashbacks with this one. We get a lot of flashbacks. We get a lot of setup for Amanda's character, And this was, again, very successful. Budget of 10 million, so the budget, as you see, is increasing as all these films go past, and it was still riding the high. It was still making 164 million. And I don't think it was until Saw 6, which was the first one that didn't clear that 100 million mark. So yeah, all the traps in this one, you open with Eric Matthews getting out of the shackle, and honestly, to me, this is more brutal than cutting your foot off. But he's very smart with it. He gets like this breeze block, and he absolutely shatters his ankle, which is horrible to see him. And the sound effects as well, the use of sound, it's always grisly. Slamming this thing down on his foot. And then the worst thing that just makes me, like every nerve in my body just go on edge like this, like my hackles go up. It's when he snaps his ankle down out of the shackle. It's horrible. Oh, that prosthetic foot just gives me fucking nightmares. Again, broken bones and everything like that. So it's horrible when he's, completely shatters his ankle. But when he snaps his foot downwards and pulls it out, it's just horrible. Mind you, if I was going to try and get out of that bathroom trap, and, I've got that shackle around my ankle, I ain't going to be shattering my ankle like that. Fuck that. And I'm certainly not going to be cutting my foot off. But I always think, like, could you... It would still really fucking hurt, but could you just, like, saw, like, a bit of your heel off? Like, just a little bit. Just, like, a little slither of your heel. Just so you can hook the shackle around. Would that work? Like, if you get the angle right, like, try and push the shackle as much as you can until it snags. And then just, like, take a little bit off your heel. Still gonna hurt, Mike. You're taking a massive chunk out of your heel. Of course it's gonna hurt. But I don't know. That seems more appealing to me than completely destroying your ankle in every conceivable bone in your ankle, or cutting your foot off completely. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. But yeah, Saw 3, they ramp up these traps right out of the gate. You've got the classroom trap, which is fucking horrible. And again, a lot of the traps in this are designed to be unwinnable. So for most of this film, you are just watching people die in all these traps. And it does get very boring in this one. There's not as much tension as to whether someone's going to survive or make it out of it, because everyone fucking dies in these films. But the classroom trap is really brutal. Even by unwinnable trap levels, this one just feels really fucking mean-spirited. And it really reminds me of the scene in Hellraiser, the Jesus wept scene, where the guy's got all of the chains in him, and he's got to rip all of these chains out. He's got like a chain that's directly through his hand, and he's got to tear this thing out of his hand, which would just completely wreck your hand. It's in his Achilles tendons, it's everywhere. And he's got one that's like a snake bite one. It's like through his fucking mouth and his jaw. How the fuck would you tear that one out? Like, you're gonna just completely shatter your jaw doing that, and you'd probably die from blood loss from something like that anyway. I don't know. That's one of the worst ones, I think. That's one of the most brutal ones. And of course he doesn't fucking make it out of there, and the bomb goes off. What's interesting is that this is our first introduction to Detective Hoffman, who's there at the crime scene. And even then, again, they were planting seeds. He looks very shifty when they're talking about Jigsaw and an apprentice. He's kind of looking around, and obviously you're watching this film. Hoffman just appears in this one scene. He's not in it very much, so you don't think anything of it. You're just like, oh, there's another detective. Why is he looking around like that? But it's not paid off in this film. So, and I don't think he sticks around enough in this film to be fresh in your mind. So when you get to Saw 4. You're like, oh, who's this Hoffman guy? Because I don't think they utilised him enough in this film, but I do like how they planted the seeds for him, and already you could maybe see that they were having ideas of where they could take this character and what they were going to do with it, and that he was actually going to be in on it the whole time. Right after that, they kill off Kerry, which I really hate, because I really like Detective Kerry's character, and I thought she was played brilliantly as well by the actress. And she's in the angel trap, which is, again, a really unfair one, another unwinnable one. But these were all the traps constructed by Amanda, right? So this thing hooks into the rib cage, and she's got to put this key's deposited in this jar of acid, and she's got to put her hand in this acid, which is going to just completely burn and strip all the flesh off her hand. She's got to retrieve this key, unlock the padlock, and apparently this thing will then just unhook itself out of a rib cage. I don't know how that works. And of course it doesn't work, and it ends up fucking lifting her up like an angel shape, and tearing her rib cage out, and it's horrible and it's grisly, and I don't know. I don't like that they killed off Kerry that early on in the movie. I would have actually loved to have seen Detective Kerry as a protagonist. Her energy and her determination really just gives me kind of Clarice Starling vibes, and I think there was a lot more they could have done with her character rather than just killing her off in like the first 10 or 15 minutes of Saw 3, which I thought was a real missed opportunity. After that, we're kind of introduced to Amanda, who's gone through a complete character change. She's a lot more masculine in this, I guess I could say. She's a bit on the butch side, I'd say. She already was a little bit in Saw 2, I guess, like punk rock maybe, but yeah, totally different personality to the character now. I've heard as well, I mean, this isn't spoilers, but there is a post-credit scene apparently at the end of the new Saw film coming out, Saw 10, which could potentially set up for another one, and they're already teasing that they might do like an Amanda spin-off. So if they were going to do one, I'd actually quite like to see something that fills in the gaps between Saw 2 and 3 to show us, that in that month gap, to show us how she transformed from the punk rock chick that we saw in the second one to whatever the fuck she is in Saw 3. This is a woman damaged. For every time that Jigsaw says that, oh, is this in Saw 5? Yeah, it's when he's talking to Hoffman and he's talking about his methods, and he says, if anyone survives one of my tests, he or she is instantly rehabilitated. And I think, yeah, apart from the $1 million of medical bills, the emotional and physical scarring, the severe PTSD, the depression that would probably follow, Amanda is not of sane mind after the reverse bear trap. When we see her as a survivor in the first film, where Detective Tapp brings Cary Elwes in to see her to get her side of the story, she's kind of twitching and she's fidgety, and she's got a lot of fucking emotional scarring from that reverse bear trap. And she's like, he helped me. I'm like, I don't think he did. And of course, when we see it, she's just gone completely off the deep end. But I don't know what snapped in her to just like wanna kill people at that point. So that's why I think there's fertile ground there for another Saw film. I'm giving Lionsgate ideas right now. There you go, get it done. Even though Shawnee Smith would look ridiculously old for that point in the film, but still, I don't care. There's more story to be told there. But she just comes across as really obnoxious and just really irritating in this film, the way that she's just so quick to anger. I do like that they kind of play a father-daughter aspect to Jigsaw and Amanda in this one, that she's very protective, but and then when he seems to take a shine to Lynn Denlon a little bit more, she just gets really jealous. But I like that angle, but it's just, she just gets really annoying. And I just don't like that the unwinnable traps thing. I feel like if you're going to say that Saw is a torture porn film, this is the one that feels the most like it, because you do have so many traps in this film where it is just done for the spectacle. It is, let's go as over the top as possible, let's go as gory as possible in this one and really push the boundaries. And I don't know, it just kind of takes away from the nuance of Saw a little bit, because for a lot of it you are just watching people die in these traps, and the story is designed to be that way because Amanda's putting people in traps just to kill them. But I don't even think they really give a compelling reason as to why. People like Detective Kerry, you could argue maybe Kerry was onto them and she wanted to kind of eliminate people. But then just stuff like Eric Matthews. And there was actually a scene cut from this movie in the like the director's commentary, when it flashes back and she's like, when Jigsaw's like, is that what happened to Detective Matthews? And she's like, I'll tell you what happened to Detective Matthews. And then we transition and we go back, and he's hobbling out and he's got this fucking broken ankle and it's really grim and it's like dragging behind him. And then he has a fight with Amanda. Oh, and then she kicks him in that ankle and it's like, and it is like fucking snaps his ankle back. Anytime he puts weight on it, and oh god, I hate it. I hate it so much. But he beats the fucking shit out of it. Like, he's slamming her head against the walls of this like basement thing. Originally there, when she walks off and he says like, you're not Jigsaw, bitch, and then she kind of turns to the camera and she's got like all of the side of her face is blooded, and she walks back. Originally there she was going to walk back, and I think there's images of this. She was going to stab him. She was basically going to prison stab Eric Matthews there. So when she says like, Eric Matthews, I'll tell you what I did to Eric Matthews, and we were going to learn there that she stabbed him, but they removed it. I don't know why they removed it, if it was something that would get them like an NC-17 rating, although I don't know, at that point just stabbing someone with a knife seems really tame for Saw at that point, considering everything else we've had in that film. But they removed it, and obviously they had other plans for Eric Matthews, which will come into it with Saw 4. But there's so many other traps in this one as well. Obviously you got like the whole Lynn Denlin and Jeff subplot as well. Jeff played by, I always forget the actor's name, Robert the Bruce from Braveheart, but he's filled out a lot more in this one. He's Robert the Bruce with a beer gut. He's bringing in the bass in this film. Jeff's kind of an annoying character as well, but I do sympathize with his character, and I do kind of hate Jigsaw for this, because he's just like, he's put this guy in a trap, both of them, because he doesn't like the way they've been grieving for their dead child. It's like, who are you to say how people grieve in different ways, okay? Like, people get over things at different points in their life. It's like, oh, you've been neglecting your daughter because you're both really hung up and sad about the death of your fucking child getting run over by a drunk driver. So you don't appreciate your life, you two, so I'm going to put you in these horrible, gruesome traps so that you do. I'm like, get over yourself, man. Who are you to decide that? And that's even funnier when you get to Saw 4. And we learn more about John Kramer's past and the death of his child and how he slipped into depression, really bad depression, and went completely off the fucking deep end and started, murdering people and putting people in all these horrific torture devices and whatnot. So who's he to talk about grieving for people? He's in no place to talk about that kind of shit. So I don't really like the circumstances of the trap in this one or why they're there. And the traps as well, we get even more traps. You've got the freezer room trap, which is very ridiculous. Like the woman who's hung up in the freezer. It's like, how long has she already been in there? What if he walked in and she'd already frozen to death? That kind of throws that whole trap into pointlessness. The fact that she turns into a solid block of ice in such a short amount of time is ridiculous. And yeah, I don't really like that trap. That's probably one of the weakest ones, I think. You've then got the trap out of all of them, which is the one that I would actually do. Is it grisly? Is it grim? Is it disgusting? Yes, it is. But guess what? To get over it, all you need is like a couple of good baths, and maybe a couple of 100 showers, and you're good. And it's the pig vat trap. It's where you've got he was the judge who never sentenced the guy. Or he only gave him a couple of months, didn't he, for a murder sentence or something like that. And there's all these decomposing pig carcasses that are being grinded up, and all the offal and the fucking gunk from them is pouring in, and it's going to drown him. But the dude gets out of it, and is it going to smell really bad? Yeah. Would you probably need a tetanus shot or something after it? Probably, and a stomach pump maybe, but a couple of baths and you just wash that shit off and you're good. You're good to go. You're not necessarily getting maimed. You're not losing any limbs. No bones are getting broken. You're just getting kind of grim, disgusting pig gunk dunked all over you. It's like those 90s kids shows. Remember, I don't know what it was with the 90s, but kids shows were just obsessed with gunge, Get Your Own Back and 50-50 and all those kind of shows. It was always gunk and goo and, all that kind of stuff. It's basically just that. It's not a nice trap. It's disgusting, and I'm a complete germaphobe, so that wouldn't be a good time for me. I don't think it'd be a good time for anyone. But it's the one out of all the traps out of the entire franchise, it's the one that I do. And he actually does survive that one, but then they just kill him off in the next trap, which is just really pointless. He gets blowback from the shotgun, doesn't he? And it hits him in the fucking face. Then we get to the most brutal trap in this film, and actually I would argue contender for the most brutal Saw trap. Certainly in the top 3, might even be my number 1. And Jigsaw even calls it his personal favourite, which is the rack. And it's the one that twists your limbs, it twists your legs round first, and again, broken bones, and shattering bones and compound fractures. It's disgusting. But the one that twists, and then the arms twist, and then the head twists finally. It's a disgusting trap, and it's really unfair, and it's really brutal. But yeah, I think that the strength of this film isn't really the traps for me. And really, in any of them, it's not the traps. It's the story and it's the characterization. And the strongest parts of this film for me is sort of like the Jigsaw, Amanda Lynn Denlon stuff. And I think, again, no surprises, Tobin Bell acts it very well. I like the final confrontation where Amanda's holding the gun at Lynn Denlon, and she's being really obnoxious again, as she is. There is an interesting thing here, and I do like how in Saw 6 we get a bit more context for what this actually was, but there is a bit of a discrepancy here in continuity error. When we see the scene happen in Saw 3, Jigsaw says, in the second drawer down, there's an envelope with your name on it. Go in there and read it. So Jigsaw is aware of this envelope, and he tells Amanda to go and read it. Now, in Saw 3, she pulls out pages and pages and pages of stuff. There's loads of stuff in this envelope, and she's reading through it all, and that's when she breaks down in hysterical tears after she's read it. But then, in Saw 6, we get more context for that, because we never got an explanation as to what was on that letter. That was just left open-ended. And I do like it. It completely changes Amanda's thought process and her motives during the ending of Saw 3 once we get that flashback in Saw 6 where we find out that Hoffman wrote that letter, but it's a singular letter, and in that letter he says that you were there with Cecil, or Cecil as they call him in these films. You were there the night that Jill Tuck lost the baby. You were the one whose idea it was to drive to that clinic, which led to the death of John Kramer's unborn child. So I want you to kill Lynn Denlon, or I will tell Jigsaw what you did. So in that moment, when she kills Lynn Denlon, it's not really done out of spite towards Lynn, as we originally thought. And it just seemed really petty that she killed her at the end. She's doing it so that John would never find out what she did. I really like that, and I think that was, as retcons go, that's really, really good. And then when you go back to watch Saw 3 with that knowledge, it completely changes the way that you see it. The problem I then have with it is that was Jigsaw's original plan, because he knows about the envelope, he tells Amanda to go and read that. Now, does he know that Hoffman wrote that letter? Does he know the contents of that letter? So he always knew that she had a part in his child's death, and he was saying, look, go in there. But then he didn't want Lynn Denlon to die. That was the whole point of Amanda's test, was that she was to let Lynn Denlon live, to let someone live and not always kill people, so that she could be a good successor to his legacy. So I don't know. Did Jigsaw originally have some other documents in there instead, and then Hoffman came in and put his own letter in there, which completely changed everything? I don't know. So there's bits like that I want to know the answers. There's some discrepancies in there, but I really want to know. But I like that they did acknowledge the letter, but as I say, you go from reams and reams of paper in Saw 3 that she's reading through, to then in Saw 6, it's a singular letter. So what was on all that other paper? Because I think they forgot about that, and they kind of retconned that a little bit. So yeah, there's a few things that break down here and there. There's obviously the tape that's covered in wax, and you've got the ending as well where Jeff kills Jigsaw. Big moment. Amanda's died. I do like that moment though, where she gets hit in the neck and she's bleeding out, and then you get this really kind of somber version of the Saw theme by Charlie Clouser, and Jigsaw's like, this was your test, your game. And, he's really cut up about it, and he starts crying after she dies, because she was like a daughter to him. And then Jigsaw died. That really shook me. When I first watched it, I was like, wow, I can't believe they've done this. And I thought, oh no, he's going to survive it somehow. Plays the tape saying, if you want to see your daughter again, you're going to have to play a game. Lynn's collar goes off. There's actually, I think in the unrated edition, there's an extended ending during this bit where, the main theatrical ending ends where it's Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun, and it ends on like a close-up shot of Lynn Denlin's completely fucking obliterated head in the collar. But the extended edition, you get that crescendo in the music where it's meant to end, but then it goes on, and you have Jeff going up to her body, and oh no, I know what it is. So he kills Jigsaw, and in the theatrical version, as Jigsaw's bleeding out, he hits play on the tape, and the tape plays out as he's bleeding out and dies. Then the collar goes off, and you just see Lynn's obliterated head. That's the theatrical version. The extended version, or the unrated edition, he slices Jigsaw's neck, but Jigsaw doesn't play the tape as he's dying, and he just bleeds out and he dies. The collar goes off, and then the ending continues where Jeff goes up to Lynn's body, and he's like, completely catatonic, and he's almost treating her like she's still alive. And then he plays the tape, and then you get another crescendo of music. It's really weirdly edited, and I really don't like the ending of the unrated version. I think it really just kills that pacing and that crescendo of the ending. But it sets you up very nicely for the sequel. It's like, Jeff, if you want to get your daughter back, she's locked up. I only know where she is, and if you want to get her back, you're going to have to play a game. Boom. And you're like, oh, okay. Some people say that would have been a good ending to the trilogy. I guess it could have been, maybe. But we're raring to go for Saw 4 now. It's like, right, Jeff is going to be our protagonist again. He's going to go through some more tests, and he's going to get his daughter back. That's not the Saw 4 that we got. And I do think the whole Jeff scenario is really anticlimactic, what they do with it in Saw 4, which we'll get onto in just a second. Brinsley's just talking about the rack trap. He says, I would definitely say it's the worst. You're in for a bad time if it's Jigsaw's favourite trap. Yeah. Favourite trap in this one? I mean, there's loads to choose from. I would probably say, yeah, it's probably the rack, isn't it? That's the one that sticks in my mind. It's the most brutal. It probably would be my number one most brutal trap of all the Saw films, and that's the one I felt really pushed the envelope of what they could get away with these films, from its relatively humble beginnings from the first Saw film to this one, where you're seeing those broken bones, and they're not holding back from the gore. They're just going for it. So yeah, it would probably be the rack. That would be my favourite trap, I would say, in this one, if I had to pick a favourite. I'm going to take a quick swig of water, guys, and then we're going to get on to the next trilogy, which is going to be Saw 4, 5, and 6. So we've got more to talk about. We've got more Saw to talk about. This video is probably going to be a lot longer than I thought it was, because I've still got to do some piano practice tonight. So I'm going to try and speed through this a little bit quicker. Wow, I've almost been going an hour and a half, and I've only covered 3 movies. I've got another 6 movies to talk about, but I don't think I'll have as much to talk about with Jigsaw and Spiral, so that'll probably be a bit quicker. I hope you guys don't have like places to be early tomorrow morning, because yeah, this might be a late one. Let's get on with it then. Let's keep on trucking. Let me just get rid of that real quick. Okay, we're up to Saw 4. So this was the first one of the franchise that I was actively waiting for to come out in cinemas. Now at that time, and this is going to be a running theme at least for the next few Saw films, I wasn't old enough to see these at the cinema. But by this point, by the time that Saw 4 was about to be released, I was a diehard Saw fan. I'd seen the first 3. I loved them. I was hyped. The trailer came out. I was watching the trailer. I really wanted to see it. I wanted to see how the story evolved. But obviously, I was nowhere near 18. And this was part of the fun and the good memories of this series. By this point, I'd got like all of my close friends into Saw, and we were talking about it. We were coming up with our own storylines of where we think it was going to go, and it's like, oh, it's going to be Jeff, and Jeff's going to have to do all of these, cool things, and his daughter, and what could the twist be, and is there another apprentice? We'd be throwing back ideas. We were coming up with ideas for traps that we could see as well. And actually, really interestingly, my mate actually called one for Saw 6, which I'll get into later, but we were in it, and we were trying to devise ways that we could sneak into the cinema. I've never snuck into an 18 before. I could never do that. I was very goody two shoes. I was always like, oh, what if I get caught? I'm gonna get arrested. But people were saying we were coming up with ridiculous, almost like Mission Impossible level plans to try and get in. Like, right, I'm going to buy a ticket for this film. We're then going to find out what screen Saw's in. I'm then going to strategically go to the bathroom and then going to like go into this screening. We were trying, man. Like, we were really trying, but I never got to see any of them in the cinema until Jigsaw, which is actually really, really sad. But every year I'd hold out hope that I could get to see these on the big screen. But this one I watched online. The next few I watched online. And I actually don't remember. This was pretty shitty quality, I think, because, now you get digital downloads, and usually even when a film's out at the cinema, it's not long. Obviously, it's on streaming now, isn't it? Within a couple of weeks, you've got stuff in like HD that hits the internet within a couple of weeks now, and it's like crisp and clear quality. This was back in the day of shitty bootleg quality, where someone's got a camera in the cinema and it's shaking and the camera's crackling and you'll see silhouettes of people standing up and walking out. There's probably parts of the movie that have cut out where they've had to shut the camera off when an attendant's walked in and turn the camera back on. There's bits where the camera dips down where they're probably trying to hide the camera. You guys know it. You guys have watched bootlegs before and pirate copies and things like that, and don't pretend you haven't, because you did. And you'd always really get them in like a shitty low-res JPEG disc cover, or it wouldn't even have a cover sometimes. It would just be like written in pen, Saw 4, or whatever it was. I never had a physical copy of any of these films, though. I never had like a physical pirate copy. These were ones that I just happened to find on the internet, I think it was at the time. And it was, a lot of these films are really dark, and it was really difficult to see what was going on. So a lot of Saw 4, when I watched it for the first time on the copy, I kind of missed, and I had to kind of piece things together that were going through. I had to just kind of like guess what was happening. I could see things that were in vivid bright colours, like the autopsy scene at the beginning, which I thought was a really cool opening scene. Finding the tape, the games have just begun, and you're like, oh, fucking hell, he's dead, and we're in Saw 4, and the games have just begun. We've had 3 films, and the games have just begun, but, I guess Jigsaw wasn't lying, because we got a lot more sequels after Saw 4. I didn't enjoy Saw 4 as much at the time, and I guess part of that was from initially watching it on a really shitty copy, because I couldn't really tell what was going on. I couldn't really get invested in what was happening a lot of the time. And I've actually heard a few other people have this same criticism on this film. I don't even know why I have this criticism now, because when I've watched it again, I'm like, none of these characters look exactly the same, but you've got Detective Hoffman, who's in this one a lot more. You've got a new character who's introduced of Agent Strom. And then you also have the character of Art Blank. And I don't know why, but I thought just all of these characters looked exactly the same. They were all kind of like the same build, the same height, the same kind of voice, the same hair colour and everything. And they're all hanging around like police precincts and stuff. And I was losing track of who was who. And again, like the shitty copy probably didn't help that I couldn't differentiate from some people. So I was losing track of which one was Strom. Was Strom the one who was kidnapped and in the chair? Was Strom the one who was the apprentice at the end? What about Art Blank? Was he the one who was... And I was just losing track. So there was like at least 3 characters in this film that all looked the same to me initially. Now I watch it and I think, what the fuck was I thinking? Because you've got Art Blank, who kind of looks like Frank Stallone. You've got Costas Mandylor, who looks like Sylvester Stallone. And then you've got Strom, who... I don't even know. Who does Strom look like? But they all look different. I don't even know why I had a problem with it, but I did. I thought it was kind of cool to have Detective Rigg as the main character, and I liked that we got a lot more focus on Rigg. But I again, similar to Saw 3, in that I just really don't appreciate why he put Jeff and Lynn in those traps in Saw 3. Because, they were just grieving in their own way for their kid. In this one, I think the circumstances of the ending with how the whole traps fall out with Detective Rigg is really fucking bullshit, and I think is really tenuous. There's a scene early on where Hoffman says, like, you know never to go through an unsecured door, ever. And basically it boils down to, if Rig had just not helped anyone and had just taken some time off and gone on vacation and fucked his wife, he would have lived. It was just that Rig was really hasty, and apparently for that he wasn't appreciating life. Because he wanted to save Eric Matthews, he wanted to save his, his partner on the workforce, one of his colleagues. Of course he did. They say that no one's ever kept a victim that long. Was it 6 months, I think it is, that they kept Eric Matthews? Or 1 month? I can't remember how long they say it. I think they say 6 months. So, yeah, I don't get it. And then he loses because he gets through the door too early. There's a countdown, but he was meant to let the countdown run out, and he would have survived, and Eric Matthews would have survived, and everyone would have been fine. Why wouldn't Art Blank just write on the door, like, don't come in, Rig? Like, just let the timer run out, kind of. I don't know. This one was bullshit. The ending of this one was bullshit. It's a cool ending when the theme kicks in and you have Hoffman get out of the chair. Hoffman definitely grew as a character, because when I first watched this one, Hoffman was a nothing character in Saw 3. He was in like one really quick scene at the crime scene of the classroom trap, and he's in this one a bit more, but we don't really get anything about his character, and he was just kind of this like boring, hulking, mumbling kind of character. And I just thought, oh, okay, we've got another apprentice. It's Hoffman, great. But I've got nothing on his character, so like, why should I give a shit? And Hoffman didn't sort of like filter massively into the plot of Saw 4 for that to be like a massive like twist at the end for me. And I was just more or less confused, like the Jigsaw saying like, the rules were clear, you were warned, don't go through that door. And I'm like, well, no, he wasn't, because Rig wasn't aware that Hoffman was a Jigsaw accomplice. So all he's doing is turning up to work, and one of his colleagues is saying, don't go through an unsecured door. Like, how is that a warning from Jigsaw? Because he didn't know that Hoffman was tied in with Jigsaw. So I don't know. I think it's the circumstances of Saw 4 are a bit bullshit, but I do think people rag on this film a little bit unnecessarily. I still really enjoy Saw 4. Some of the traps are pretty creative. As I say, I like that it continues the story of Rig, but of course it doesn't go well. A lot of the Saw films really are cleaning shop when it comes to, they're just kind of cleaning house of all of these supporting characters. You got rid of Eric Matthews in this movie, you got rid of Kerry in the previous movie, and slowly but surely you kind of get rid of the entire police precinct. But it ends in a cool way. It's, Hoffman, it's like you feel you now have control, don't you? You feel like you will walk away untested. And it's like, oh, Hoffman's going to get tested at some point. He's not out of the neck of the woods yet. One of the other big twists as well, this has exactly the same two twists as Saw 2 again. It's the new apprentice twist with Hoffman, and it's this timeline isn't actually happening at the time you think it is. This is actually happening at the same time as Saw 3. So you have that moment where Strom breaks into the medical room with Jigsaw, and Jeff's in there, and he's like, let me see your fucking hands. And Jeff's like, where is my daughter, you motherfucker? And then Jeff just gets shot, and he's dead. And that did kind of gut me, because I had all of these theories, I had all of these fan fiction ideas of what Saw 4 could have been and what Jeff was going to do. And, and if you want to get her back, you're going to have to play a game. What are these games? Like, how is he going to get his daughter back? I want to know. And then Jeff's just immediately shot and he's killed. I was like, oh. And I actually think Saw 4 is really creative, that it happens at the same time as Saw 3. I thought that was an interesting way to go about it and the narrative, but it does feel like it's dragging its heels. And certainly when you get to Saw 5, it feels like, oh my god, we're still in this meat packing factory, we're still in this hospital, like, get this train a moving, let's get something new. I'm tired of this medical set, I want to see some new shit. I always thought it'd be really interesting if the water box in Saw 5, the one that Strom gets put on, because that's a secret doorway behind the medical room. I always wondered if that was the game that was intended for Jeff. you know, because it's like, if you want to get it back, you'll have to play a game. I'm wondering if it was going to lead to that passage behind there, that secret doorway, and then he was going to find himself in the water box trap or something. But I don't know. But then the tape is directed to Peter Strahm, and again, it's Jigsaw thinking of all these infinite possibilities of how situations can go down, which is just ridiculous. All the amount of variables that this guy's juggling in his head. It's like, oh yeah, Strahm is going to come through that door. He's going to shoot Jeff, and he's going to find this secret door. Do not proceed because it's not going to end well for you, or whatever it is. So I don't know how much of it is Hoffman doing these messages in Jigsaw's voice, but when he says like the reveal of my body and everything like that, I'm pretty sure that was actually Jigsaw who was directly talking to Peter Strahm there. It's weird. When it gets to this stage, it's just kind of nonsense. But the strengths of Saw 4 again is the flashbacks, and we get loads more stuff. Again, another plot thread which I guess they were gearing up for, now I come to think of it, in Saw 3, was when Jigsaw is having a stroke and he's fitting. He has this vision of this blonde lady who's Jill Tuck. We didn't know it was Jill Tuck at the time. We assumed it was just like an old flame or something. But we actually get Jill Tuck in this one, and we find out who she is, and we get loads of setup for the origin of his character. Like, why the pig mask? Well, it was in Chinatown, it was the year of the pig, and everyone was wearing pig masks, and that was the thing that he used to disguise himself in that parade. And that's what he used to chloroform someone, was with that mask. So I was like, oh, okay, that's the origin point for why he uses the pig masks. You then have he had these little sort of like Chinese terracotta army figures that you see him sort of like on his bedside table, and we see Cecil stealing some during this same Chinese market. We learned that he's interested in the Chinese zodiac, and he was trying to plan the pregnancy with Jill Tuck, and everything's really methodical, and his child was going to be born at this certain time. Gideon, the loss of his child and everything like that. As I say, it's weird that he never really brought that up earlier, but I like that we flesh out more of his character and the bad luck that really befell his character. And then his first trap, which was well, I guess it wasn't his first trap, was it, when you get into stuff like Jigsaw? Or maybe it was. Was it his first trap? I lose track of the chronology of all these films, but the knife chair that he puts Cecil in, where he has to push his like face through the fucking knives, that's a pretty cool trap. I like that. And then you know, he tries to lunge at Jigsaw, and Jigsaw sidesteps out the way, and he ends up in some razor wire. And I like to think that was the precursor for Jigsaw for getting the idea for the razor wire trap that we see in Saw 1. What's interesting as well is, and I think this was another abandoned idea as well, right after that scene we see Jigsaw throw back this cloth, and it's the glass coffin with all shards of glass in there. And I think that was an abandoned trap from Saw 4. I think that actually was going to feature in the film, and I think there was a set photo of a deleted scene which was going to be that trap, and it's someone in the glass coffin, and they're like screaming, and obviously you've got the broken glass shards. So yeah, I can't remember who was in that trap though, or even what it would have done. It's just like, would the glass have just cut you a little bit, or would the coffin have been filled with something? I'm not sure what it is, because yeah, it's sharp glass, but if you're not moving and you're just kind of laying on it stationary, I don't know how that's going to cause you any real harm. So I'm not sure, but apparently I think it was cut because, again, of like the NC-17 thing, like it was just considered, I guess they have a limit on how much gore they can have in something and how many traps are too many traps. So, you know, that one was on the cutting room floor. But remember that glass coffin, because we will see it again in the next film. But it's just weird how it gets a reveal from Jigsaw in this one, and then we never really, and even in Saw 5, like, we don't get much of a payoff for that coffin. We don't really find out like what it necessarily does, other than the fact that it takes Hoffman to safety as the wall crusher comes over. So yeah, a bit of a mixed bag on Saw 4, but I think that the strengths of it are in fleshing out Jigsaw's character a little bit more. We get more of an insight into his character. The puppet as well, we get the origin for the puppet. He made like this really creepy gothic fucking doll for his kid. I don't know why anyone would think that that would be appropriate for a newborn child. This like creepy wooden marionette puppet that looks like something Tim Burton would create. But that was obviously Billy the puppet. I don't know why he called it Billy. I don't think he actually calls it Billy in the movies, does he? I think that was just a name that James Wan came up with for it. But yeah, I'm trying to think what else. We learned he was developing housing, wasn't he? He was an engineer, and they were creating housing for less well-off families and everything like that. And Art Blank was his attorney, I think it was, or his business partner or something like that. So we learn more about his engineering background. We know that he purchased a load of these properties, which, it fleshes the world out a little bit more. So I like that. In terms of traps in this one, what do we have? We have the scalping trap with that woman where it yanks her hair off, where it scalps her. There's the one with like the creepy fucking rapist weirdo in the motel, and he's strapped to a bed, and he has to like hit these little mini scythes come down, and he has to gouge his eyes out, and then it rips all of his limbs off. There's the one where you've got the married couple where they're skewered with these metal rods, and they've been pushed through non-fatal points in her body where it's like pain. I think he says pain will be incurred, but like you'll basically survive from it. However, the husband behind her, they've been it's basically like kaplunk. That's the only way I can describe that, if you guys know what that is. And when she pulls them out, she'll be fine, but they're through like vital arteries in her husband behind her, and she has to like pull them out. And then you've got like the final test with like the ice block thing and Eric Matthews as well. Big reveal that he's still alive, and he just does nothing in this film. He's just mumbling, and he looks like a hobo, and then he just gets his fucking head crushed at the end. So that was a bit of a missed opportunity with that as well. So favorite trap in this one? Oh, and then the knife chair. It'd be the knife chair. I like the rawness of that trap. I like that it's very bare bones. It's very, just kind of DIY constructed. There's nothing necessarily fancy about it in terms of its creation. It just looks really grisly and DIY'd together, which I think adds to the visceral quality of that scene. So I'd probably go with the knife chair for that one, I think. Brinsley says, it does get hard to keep track of the chronology as it's all over the place, especially if you haven't seen it for a while. The guy in the bed gets it bad and he loses one eye and then runs out of time, I think. Yeah, he does. Yeah, he gets one eye. But why would you do one at a time? Just hit both of them and just... It's going to be painful, but just have both of them going at the same time. Otherwise, you got to feel the same pain twice. That just doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah, that's actually hilarious when he gets all of his limbs ripped off, because it's so over the top. And I think, doesn't it rip them off so forcefully that it flings him off the bed? Like when they find his body, his like body's off the bed. I don't know. I've got a sick sense of humor with stuff like that. So yeah, Saw 4. It's a mixed bag, but I think considering you've killed your main character off in the previous film, where do you take the story? I like that they decided to set it at the same time. Does it stall the storytelling a little bit? Yeah, I guess it does. Oh, you've got Perez as well. I think Lindsay Perez is introduced into this film, which is Peter Strom's partner, and she takes the shrapnel of the Billy doll to the face, and we assume that she died in this film, but they'll bring her back. We'll get some more of Lindsay Perez. They'll kind of retcon that, but okay, I'm going to take another quick swig, and then we're on to Saw 5. We're getting through it, guys. We're getting through it. How are we all doing, by the way? Are we all enjoying this video? I hope we are. It's great that we're getting to chat Saw, because as I say, we never talk about these films. It's not a franchise that I talk about all that much, but yeah, love talking about these films. It's one of my favourite film series, so... We should do more horror conversations, actually. I've been wanting to do that on the channel for years now. I just really want to take like a franchise of horror films and just watch them all, and just basically what we're doing now, and just talk about them one by one. I think that'd be really cool. Whether it be in one big video like I'm doing these, or whether it be individual videos weekly, I don't know, but that could be an idea. Here we go then. On to the next one. Saw 5. This is where we had a bit of a quality dip with this one. Well, number one, we had a different director. We moved from Darren Lynn Bousman to... I'm going to find his name on here. David Hackle. Now, I think David Hackle gets a lot of hate for Saw 5, and I don't think all of it's justified. This really is a film in two halves for me. Now, the first time I watched this film... similar to Saw 4, obviously, I still wasn't old enough to see this on the big screen, and I'm sure by the time that Saw 5 was rolling around, I'd come up with an even more wackier harebrained scheme to try and get into the cinema to watch Saw 5, to see what was going to happen. And I never snuck in, again, because I was still a goody two-shoes. I never snuck into any Saw film. I really wish I had now. So this one was very much a copy. Now, Saw 4... was still a shit copy, and the quality was terrible on there, but it was still somewhat watchable, and I could still kind of relatively tell what was going on. Saw 5, I was tracking down... You know when you try and find like a pirate copy on day one of release? Not that I've ever done that. I did do for Saw 5. But when you really want to watch a movie and like you're desperate, like especially back in the day when you weren't old enough to watch these films, you'd find a copy that was like released on the same night or like the same evening that it's released, and it's always the first one out of the gate is always the shittest quality one. There is shit quality pirate copies, and then there's the copy that I had for Saw 5. This was the worst, most unintelligible shit that I've ever watched, but I'm a Saw fan and I wanted to watch it. Honestly, a lot of this was the audio experience of Saw 5. I could barely see the screen. A lot of the time I couldn't even see the screen. And I remember downloading it. I think I had it as like an MPEG-4 file, like a .mov file. And this was MSN at the time. Do you remember MSN Messenger? I got a copy of it and I had the file and it was downloaded, which I probably got off like fucking LimeWire or something. I can't even remember. And I sent it to my best mate at the time, still my best mate now. He's been on a video actually, Mark, the one who I did my Creed 3 review with, who's probably going to be on the video for Saw 10 with me later this week, hopefully, if he decides to do the review with me. I sent it to him on MSN, and really slow internet in those days, guys. Like, internet's still slow now to send something like that, but this said it was going to take hours to send. Hours. And I really wanted to watch it, and I was like, no, we're going to watch it together. So I sent this file to him. And no word of a lie, it got to like 99.999%. And then I think something fucked up on my internet and it failed to send. This shit was going for hours, like 12 hours or more. It was ridiculous. And, oh God, I remember that happening. Anyway, I had to send it him again. So this was like days after the release, and I was trying to dodge spoilers and everything like that. And we eventually got it, and we stayed up one night to watch it, and we synced our copies together, and we couldn't tell what the fuck was going on. We couldn't see the screen half the time. We could just hear like audio bites, and even then, like the audio quality wasn't that good, and it completely ruined the ending. Like the Hello Zepp theme kicked in, and we knew that something big, and we could hear someone screaming, and we could hear like we could hear that gory sound effect, but we couldn't really tell what was going on. So right after it finished, I went onto Wikipedia, and I basically had to read the plot and kind of piece things together from the audio that I heard from Saw 5. It was so fucking bad. I don't even know why I suffered through it, but I was a Saw fan, goddammit, and I really wanted to see it. But I basically had to read what happened in Saw 5, which was really shitty, and then obviously I probably watched it again when it came out on DVD, or maybe I think maybe there was like a slightly better quality version that was released, pirate copy that I might have watched. I actually don't remember. Brinsley says, hell yeah, big fan of horror films. MSN Messenger, oh God, yes, remember him. He kind. Yeah, he's very kind. I'm going to be best man at his wedding next month, actually. So, yeah, I need to start writing a speech. How do you guys do speeches? How do you do public speaking? This doesn't count as public speaking because, yeah, I am, I know there's people watching, but I'm talking to a camera right now, so I don't know. Anyway, that's a story for a different time. Saw 5. So, After watching this film again, and watching the copy at the time, I didn't really like this movie, and I still will say it's out of like the main 7 Saw films. Like if you're just going from Saw to Saw the Final Chapter, this is probably the second worst for me. But the more that I've watched it, there are a lot of elements to it that I really enjoy. I'm going to talk about the stuff that I don't enjoy first, and then I'll kind of bookend it with the stuff that I do. I really don't care for any of the traps in this film, even more so than some of the other ones. Again, it's another group dynamic trap, very similar to Saw 2, but you just don't care about any of the characters in this one. And once again, and I don't think the acting is that great, actually, from a lot of the people in the group trap in this one. But there's one character, you got the British guy who works for the Herald, who, like, creates the headlines and everything. He's a journalist, I think, isn't he? And he dies in, like, the second trap. And he's really the most interesting character. It's a similar kind of thing to the Obi situation. He dies second, and it's like, no, this guy should have been in it to the end. He's the most entertaining. He's got the most personality, and you off him straight away. We don't really get much about his character at all. There's 5 people in the trap because we're at Saw 5, and they always want to do this number gimmick, and we get another one in the next film for Saw 6 as well, with the carousel trap. And yeah, this one ultimately boils down to that if all of them just worked together, then all of them could have survived. No one basically had to die. And that becomes really evident in stuff like I think it's the second trap where there's a bomb and they've got to open these hatches into these tunnels which will avoid the blast. And these tunnels are fucking massive. It's like, just all of you get in a tunnel and you're fine. But they don't think of that, and then obviously the guy dies. So I just really don't care for the traps in this one. I just don't care for the people. It's just pointless. It ultimately boils down to that all 5 of them conspired together. There was like a house fire where someone died, and then someone renovated the property or something and sold it on and made a lot of money from it. And then you had the journalist who covered the story up. You had the person who lit the match in the first place, and all of them were a part of this situation. And it seems so disconnected from everything, and it's like, why should I give a shit about this? But also, more importantly, it's like, how the more traps that you set up from this kind of stuff, like stuff in Saw 5, Saw 6, and especially when you get to Saw 7, it's like, is Hoffman setting all of these things up? Did Jigsaw clearly didn't set all of these things up before, because he's dead at this point. So Jigsaw set all the stuff up from Saw 3 and probably Saw 4, because it's happening at the same time. But this has got to be all Hoffman, right? Hoffman would have kidnapped all of these people and set it all up. We see his little base of operations. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. Dude's working a detective job at a police precinct, and then on his nights off, he's got to set all this shit up as well. And, like the timeline, because Saw 5 happens directly after Saw 4. It's like, when did he have all of this shit set up? When did he go and sort all this shit out? It's terrible. I really hate it. And I think the original idea behind the whole burning building thing and the fire, I think this is in the director's commentary or the writer's commentary or something, and they eventually abandoned the idea. But I actually, not that it would have improved the characters or anything, but I think it would have connected it more to the Saw world. In Saw 1, when Detective Tapp and Detective Singh are they're watching a Billy the Puppet video, and he hears a fire bell ringing in the video, and he says like, oh, I know that graffiti wall, that's this part of this street. And then he says, oh, there's a fire bell there, so cross-reference all the fire drills that have gone off in that area and we'll know where the location is. That fire drill that we heard ringing in Saw 1 was going to be the burning building that these 5 conspired to create. And I thought that would have been a real cool way of tying it into Saw 1, because in so many of the flashbacks in Saw 5, there are some callbacks to Saw 1. We go back to Saw 1. We go back, before Saw 1. We set up things like the pen light from Saw 1, the kidnapping the guy who's in the razor wire trap in the first Saw film. And I don't know, I thought this would have been a really cool way to bring that in and to tie everything together, like everything's all connected in the great circle of life kind of thing. But they don't address that in the movie, and even if that was an idea, it's not in the final product, so we just have, oh yeah, these people did some bad shit. And that's it. What are the traps? You have the one where they have to like fill 10 pints of blood up at the end, don't you? And they have to like push their hand in like a razor thing. But I watched like a YMS video on the Saw franchise, and he raises a valid point. He's like, why can't they just piss into it? Like, fill it up with a little bit of blood and then just fill the rest up with piss? Because it will still fill the liquid up. I don't know. Not that anyone's going to piss, like 10 pints, but... Or, I don't know. Depends how... If it's like Dumb and Dumber, if you really need to go, maybe you will. But my favourite parts of Saw 5 is the stuff with Hoffman, because I mentioned how in Saw 4 you don't really get any character for him, so the revelation that he's an apprentice at the end kind of falls flat. We get the characterization in this one with Hoffman. We know why he does what he does, why he sides with Jigsaw, and basically his modus operandi, and that he created... His sister was, I think, like raped and murdered by this guy, Seth Baxter, who wasn't charged, and he wanted justice for this, so he created a copycat killer scenario with the pendulum trap, which, considering Hoffman isn't an engineer, to even set up something like that with the pendulum trap and everything like it, it's crazy. And he does it to make it look like a Jigsaw killing, so he gets away with it scot-free. He gets the retribution he needs, but then, he can just pin it on Jigsaw. Jigsaw essentially blackmails Hoffman and says, like, I've got all of this stuff that will corroborate my story, that will reveal you that you were the one who did it, and I will release this information to the police if you don't join me. So you get the impression that Hoffman has joined Jigsaw out of obligation, because he's been blackmailed. But then later it's weird, because it's difficult to see where Hoffman's loyalties lie, because Jigsaw tests him in Saw 6 and like really fucks his face up, but then Hoffman still carries out traps in Jigsaw's name in Saw 7. It's like, why? What do you owe this guy now? He's dead. Like, you don't have to keep continuing his work. So it gets very strange. I always thought there was this like really uneasy sense of obligation with Hoffman, in that he's only doing this because he kind of has to, because he doesn't want to be revealed that he was a killer. But then he just turns into like a tyrannical police precinct murdering behemoth of a character by the end of this franchise. So I don't know. It's really weird, but I do appreciate the stuff they do with him, because he's not really framed as a killer. Obviously he kills Seth Baxter, but you kind of understand why he did what he did, and he's got a moral code to him. He just wanted retribution for the death of his sister and everything like that, and he's a guy who's gone through the ringer. So I like that we get all that stuff. I like seeing him construct traps with Jigsaw, and Jigsaw kind of taking him under his wing and saying, if you're good at anticipating the human mind, it leaves nothing to chance. We see him setting up the Saw 2 trap, the house trap. I think, is it in this one that we see him? No, that's Saw 6. No, I'm thinking of Saw 6 with that one. But you do see him setting up the trap. I swear it's this one, the Saw 2 trap. And isn't Jigsaw kind of like doing the gun behind the door trap? It's stuff like that, and then saying that there's a detective who's on to me, I need you to keep him off the trail, so I want you to plant this pen light. It's a doctor who needs some healing, and it's like, oh, it's Dr. Gordon, and then you go back and watch Saw 1, and we understand where that pen light came from and the scenario for that. We see him abducting that guy with a razor wire trap, and Hoffman was the one who helped him do that. So I love all of that stuff in Saw 5. So if you just cut out all the traps of Saw 5 and you just keep it to Detective Strom finding out all this information and the flashbacks of Jigsaw, I really like it. There's some really clunky bits though where Strom likes to talk to himself. Clearly they think that the audience is really stupid watching this film, so he will talk to himself and address the camera and say things like, you killed him and made it look like a Jigsaw trap, didn't you? And it's like, you wouldn't be talking to yourself. You're doing this for the audience's benefit because you think they're too stupid to understand what's going on with the story. So that stuff I don't like. The screenplay is really weak to this one, but again, the Jigsaw stuff is very good. The flashbacks, I enjoy that, and going back to Saw 1. The ending's pretty cool as well. the glass coffin that I mentioned makes a comeback in this one, and Hoffman on the tape says, you know, the only way to survive this room is to step into the glass box before you. Pain will be incurred, but you have a chance at survival. But again, as I say, like the coffin's upright, and it's like shards of glass in there. So like just lay against it a little bit. You haven't got to like press your back fully against it, but just, you know, just lay in it. Don't shuffle it around too much, and then it just lowers into the ground. Like I don't get how that will cause pain. Not to the extent that it is in, you know, like in like a saw trap, but Strom doesn't listen to all the tape, and then the walls start closing in. Hoffman is lowered into safety, and the walls crush Strom in a very gruesome way. And that's what I heard on the pirate copy. I just heard like a lot of gore and Strom screaming, and I didn't really know what was happening until eventually I saw it again. So Saw 5 is, out of the main 7, is the second worst. If you're introducing Jigsaw and Spiral into the mix, then it definitely isn't the second worst. It would be the fourth worst. I will rank these at the end, I think, in terms of my favourites, but granted, I haven't watched them in a long time, so my order may change now. So my order is going to be from what I remember about them when I last watched them. That's kind of it for Saw 5. Oh, I didn't mention something. The end credits song in Saw 4, just going back real quick. Real great band called X Japan do the song IV. Love that song. There's like a beautiful piano breakdown in there. Really talented musicians. I'm a big fan of X Japan, and that's a great fucking song. The end credits song for Saw 4. Anyway, that's Saw 5. Oh, Saw 5. At the beginning, we see Hoffman walk out with Jeff's daughter. He rescued the daughter. So again, that was the whole, like, if you want to get her back, I am the only... Oh yeah, Jigsaw says it in Saw 3. I am the only one who knows where your daughter is. She only has a limited supply of air, Jeff, and if you want to get her back, you'll have to play a game. Well, I guess that Amanda, in Saw 6, you get the post-credits scene where she goes up to the room where Jeff's daughter is, so I guess Amanda knew where Jeff's daughter was, and Hoffman knows where Jeff's daughter is, and he's meant to look like the hero and rescues her and everything. But yeah, there's a post-credit scene in Saw 6 which I thought would filter into the rest of the narrative, because Amanda says, "Don't trust the one who saves you." So she knew that Hoffman was going to save the daughter, I guess. So she knew that Jeff was going to die. Yeah, I don't know. So did Amanda know? Amanda knew at that point. I think this is after she read the letter. So Amanda knew in her mind that she was going to have to kill Len Denlin. After that, she probably knew that Jeff was going to kill her. And then I guess she also knew that he would kill Jigsaw. I don't know how she knew that Strom was going to come in and shoot Jeff and kill him. But Amanda says, "Don't trust the man who saves you." Well, what if Jeff had have survived? What if Strom didn't walk in? What if Strom was the one who saved her? What if Jeff was the one who saved her? Would she still not trust him? So Amanda knew in the post-credit scene of Saw 6 that Hoffman was going to be the one to save her. So I don't know how this thing works. But I thought that was going to plant the seed in the mind. You know, don't trust the one who saves you. And it was going to be Jeff's daughter who's the one who maybe gives that information to the cops or rats them out, which then turns the cops onto, hang on, maybe it's this Hoffman guy. I thought it was going to filter into the plot that way, but it really doesn't. It's kind of like a pointless post-credit scene, because the whole Jeff's daughter thing just never comes up again. She's just rescued by Hoffman, and that's it. But I thought maybe that could have been a cool way of getting Perez and the other detective onto Hoffman, maybe. Favorite trap in Saw 5? What do we have? We have the pendulum trap. We have the bomb trap. I think there's one. There's the one where they get pulled back. They've got like a noose around their neck, and they get pulled back and decapitated. They do a similar kind of trap to that in Jigsaw as well. They kind of repeat themselves after a while. There's the one where they have to saw their arm down, and then there's the wall crushing one. Oh, it's a toss-up between the pendulum trap, which is pretty grisly, but I think I've got to give it to the wall crushing one. I love Star Wars: A New Hope, and there's that wall crushing thing, and it's like I've always wanted to see what that would look like if it actually worked. And then you watch Saw 5, and you get it. It's really grisly. If I was in Strom's situation, I've seen some people say that he probably could have taken out Hoffman as well if he'd have took off his jacket and kind of stuffed it into the gears of the lowering glass coffin. Would it have prevented the gears from going down, so both of them would have got crushed? But also, I think at that point, if I've got a gun, I think I'd just fucking shoot myself. If it's either going to be getting crushed slowly to death by walls or just shooting myself in the head and dying instantly, I'm taking that. Yeah, that's a weird way to end the Saw 5 conversation, but there we go. Saw 5. Okay, Saw 6, we're getting through it. I need to wrap this shit up because I've got to stay up late doing piano. And I've also got to be up early to do piano. This isn't going to end well. Okay. This is going on way longer than I thought it was. 2 hours. Jesus, I thought I'd get this done in an hour. My bad. Okay, speed fire, speed fire, speed fire. Are you guys all hanging in there? Are you all staying strong? Hopefully you guys are sticking around. Okay. We're on to Saw 6 now. We're on to a good one. Boom. Saw 6. Brinsley says, crushed slowly to death, such a brutal way to go. Yeah. I think it would have been cool if Strom had survived though, and we got like a cool cat and mouse film for Saw 6 between those two. But again, clean in shop, right? Clean in shop. Saw 6. Kevin Groider is in. This was the guy who edited all of the previous Saw films. Editing duties were now given to Andrew Coote. But yeah, Kevin Groider is in the director's chair, and I think he does a really fucking good job. This is a damn sight better than Saw 5. I think it's one of the most entertaining Saw films. And one that I'd actually... Seaward Man says you are reviewing every Saw film. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. And then obviously Saw 10's out later this week. This is probably one of my favourite Saw films. I think it's really entertaining. I think it's well directed. Is the writing all that great? Are there some leaps in logic? Of course. That's kind of what you expect from the Saw films now. But I just love the quality of this one. This one gets really political though. So it's all about like the American healthcare system. And I think I remember at the time, I don't know US politics, and I can't even remember when this one was out. This was, when was it? 2009. Wasn't there like some big like healthcare reform bill that came out or something around about that time? I remember the whole healthcare thing though being a very topical subject. So, you know, they clearly went off the zeitgeist, what was going on at the time, and it's a very political one. We get more flashbacks of Jigsaw, how his health insurance or health coverage was denied, which led to, you know, he couldn't chase after treatments for his cancer because they just said, oh, it's not viable. And that leads him to wanting to exact revenge on the healthcare system and the ones that prevented him from getting his cancer cure. Once again, it's like, how many of these traps did Jigsaw have planned? Because this is after he died. So he had all the traps and things sorted for Saw 3. And for Saw 4, because Saw 4 happens at the same time as 3. Then he also has most of the traps sorted in Saw 5. I've just got to assume he made all the traps in Saw 5. At least Strom's one, because the tape directly references that. And then he's also got these ones in Saw 6, and clearly these are made by Jigsaw, these traps, I would assume. Because how much more work has Hoffman got to do? How does Hoffman find the time to do all this? Like, I think Jigsaw is actually on the video screen in this one, isn't it? It's not so much the puppet, I don't think, in this one. I think you do actually see Jigsaw on the TV screen in this one. This is a personal fucking trap to him. So he's produced all these videos. I don't know if he just spent a day recording in bulk shit tons of videos for future traps for people that might happen. But I'm guessing that Hoffman was the one that procured all these people and got them all set up. Whether he made the traps for all these, I don't know. Saw 6, I remember looking forward to it, and I think it was between Saw 5 and Saw 6 that I remember asking my two mates at school, right, let's think of a trap that's going to be in this new one. Let's come up with an idea for one. What haven't they done yet? And my mate, who was he was really into chemistry at school, he said, oh, I think they should do one with like hydrofluoric acid or whatever it's called. And he called it, because later on in the year Saw 6 rolls out and the big trap at the end of the movie is hydrofluoric acid, which burns straight through the character. But this one, actually, there's elements to the traps in this one that feel a bit more personal. For anyone who says Jigsaw doesn't kill people, it's a load of fucking horseshit, because there's traps in this one like the carousel traps where you've got 6 people on there and he says 2 can live, 4 must die. Well, then you're a fucking murderer. Like, what chance do all 6 of those people have? You know, so the odds in this one are really unfair, and I don't like when it kind of breaks away from that original Jigsaw ideology a little bit. But I like that they're a lot more personal in this one, and I really like the main character in it as well, who's going through all the traps. Let me check it. It's William, isn't it? Peter Outerbridge, who plays him. He plays it really well, especially when you get to traps like the hanging trap, where he has to decide who lives. One has a family, and one is kind of a loner, and if he disappeared, he's like, you know, he wouldn't even be missed. But again, it's like Jigsaw's putting people in traps based on if they appreciate life or not, depending on if they have a family or not. Like, that's really bullshit. The first trap as well is this old janitor guy who's had a history of smoking, despite being warned against it or something. He's had like I don't know, he's got asthma, but he continues to smoke. And this is what I was telling you guys to remember from Saw 1. Jigsaw says smoking is harmless unless it leads to bloodshed. But then in this one, it's like, oh, I'm going to put a smoker in a trap because he's asthmatic, but he still continues to smoke. Well, that goes against what Jigsaw said in Saw 1. And isn't that just, oh, okay, so now we're just putting fucking smokers in traps? How many people smoke in the world? Like, it's, I don't know, it's crazy. So again, some of the reasoning why he puts people in traps in this one is a bit shit. But I like the carousel trap in this one. It gives a chance for all 6 people on the carousel to just really show some personality, and I like that people are lying. Like, one woman says that she's pregnant to try and save herself, and then the other guy says, like, no, don't listen to her, she's fucking lying. She's like, no, I'm telling the truth. And in that desperate situation, you're really seeing them like backstab each other, all of these colleagues. It's a cool moment. It's like they don't get much character, but there's quite a lot of personality in that scene. And out of a lot of the traps, it actually hits you with the ramifications after that. When he saves those 2 people, and it's down to the last 2, and he can only save 1 more, and he makes a decision, and the guy's just like screaming, and he's saying like, look at me, when you're killing me, you look at me, and he's like whimpering right before he dies. And then you've got that aftermath after it. I don't know, I thought that was really effective. I thought that was really well done, and that trap kind of stuck with me quite a lot. So if I'm going for my favourite trap in Saw 6, it's the carousel trap. And that's the one that tries to follow the number gimmick as well. It's like, you know, 6 people ride the carousel, and it's Saw 6. We learn in this one as well that the autopsy scene that we saw at the beginning of Saw 4 actually takes place during the events of Saw 6 midway through. It's interesting to note as well that the guy who's the... is it pathologist? Is that the name of it? The guy who's like doing the autopsy and, you know, like the medical crime stuff. Originally, I think in Saw 4, he was going to be the apprentice of Jigsaw. It was going to be the one who was doing the autopsy in the morgue. And then they changed their idea with it, which is an idea which I think they eventually go with come Jigsaw, where we get the other apprentice who was a pathologist. So they kind of took that idea from that, I think. But that would have been interesting, I guess, to go in that way. But I think it probably works out better the way they went with it. Hoffman is fucking great in this movie. He is an unstoppable killing machine. And I love when it's like the cops are like finally onto him. There's genuinely like a really good scene of tension where they're decrypting the voice. So we learned that Lindsay Perez actually survived, so I like that Lindsay Perez came back for at least 1 more movie before she gets prison shanked. But they faked her death, and I'm assuming she was meant to be dead in Saw 4. I get the impression, you know, she didn't come back in Saw 5, and then in Saw 6 you have oh, what's his name? Detective Erickson. He says like, oh yeah, we put her in like a secure environment because we wanted to like fake her death because we didn't want anyone to know. And I'm like, okay. I don't think that was the original idea. I think you just brought her back maybe just because it was someone to bring back. But there's the scene where they're decrypting the voice, the Seth Baxter tape, and they're using like this really advanced audio editing software to try and take away all the audio filters of Jigsaw to find out who the original voice is. And they know it's Hoffman. Like, they're onto him. They know that something doesn't add up. And Hoffman's pacing around the room. He's trying to find a weapon. He's trying to find like an exit strategy. And I love the body language of this scene as well. There's a scene where Erickson says, oh, well, actually, someone could be setting you up as an accomplice to Jigsaw, and they could have fabricated this whole story. And like Costas Mandylor kind of eases up and goes, oh, okay, yeah, no, I can run with this. Like, yeah, that's an idea. And then Erickson goes, oh, actually, no, because that doesn't add up, though, because the fingerprints of Strom was already dead. And it's like, right now you are feeling helpless. And right now you are feeling helpless is the voice on the tape, but it also translates to Hoffman feeling helpless in that scene. And then she's like, got it. Right now you are feeling helpless. And they've got Hoffman's voice. He throws the coffee in fucking Perez's face. He shoots Erickson, doesn't he? Or he stabs Perez. And he says, like, who else knows about me? Who else fucking knows about me? She's like, everyone knows. I'm like, oh, that's such a cool scene. And then he just burns the place to the ground. Dude takes out 2 entire police precincts. The guy's like an 80s action hero. But yeah, I guess I there's more of a emotional stake, and I like the character of William going through the traps in this one. It's more of a personal series of traps to Jigsaw as well, so it brings him into the narrative a little bit more. Some of the traps are quite creative in this one, compared to the other ones in Saw 5. But again, it's like the Hoffman stuff. It's like the main thrust of the story is always the one I'm concerned about. The more group traps there are, or the more roomfuls of traps or buildingfuls of traps there are, the more I'm like, how did they have time to set all of this up? And that kind of compounds on itself, especially when you get to... Well, it's already compounded on itself, but it compounds even more when you get to Saw 7, especially. That Hoffman's still doing all of this shit whilst he's also decimating... police precincts. Yeah, Brinsley says Hoffman goes Terminator mode. Yeah, he fucking does. It's great. We love Costas Mandylor. But yeah, what else can I say about Saw 6? Oh, this is where I've already talked about it, but we get the revelation of the letter to Amanda. Amanda's back in it as well. We get some more flashbacks there. We see her setting up... We see a bit of an interplay between her and Hoffman. He's saying like, oh, I don't need a test, and Amanda's kind of jeering him about that. The post-credit scene, as I mentioned, where she says don't trust the man who saves you to the little girl, that doesn't really lead to anything, which is a bit of a shame. But I do like the retcon with Amanda. I do think that's quite effective, even if, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't quite tie into Saw 3, when in Saw 3 we saw that the letter contained pages and pages and pages of material that she was reading, whereas in this one it just seemed like it was a single letter. In this one as well, we set up the will of Jigsaw, and he leaves a box to Jill Tuck. She posts a VHS cassette tape through into the hospital, which we will find out what that is in the next film. The rest were for Hoffman, I think, weren't they, to round up with people for his trap. Oh yeah, so I guess Hoffman did set up all the traps for this one. I don't know where he found time to do that. I don't know how he did that, but okay. And then the last one, again, 6 envelopes. It's Saw 6, remember? So the 6 envelopes in the will. And then the last one was for her, because she was having to try and kidnap Hoffman. And to me, they honestly could have ended you wouldn't have tied up what that VHS cassette was for the hospital, I guess. So I guess you could remove that. But to me, this was the last truly great Saw film. And I think they could have ended the franchise on this one. Finally, Hoffman gets tested, and he gets put in the reverse bear trap, seemingly with no way out. I think it was designed for his execution, so it wasn't really testing him in any way. But Hoffman is so much of a fucking Terminator. He manages to survive it. He jams the bear trap in between the bars of the door. Really quick thinking on that, though, I've got to say. it barely breaks apart. Fucks his mouth up though on one side, and then the final shot is where he just screams to the sky like, "Ah!" like this messed up mouth. Cut to black. Fuck yeah, I love Saw 6. Saw 6 is great. It's definitely one of my favourites out of the whole franchise. And I kind of wish they'd have ended on a high with this one, because I think that would have still been a cool ending. You know, he's like, oh, you think you'll walk away untested? Boom, there you go. There's your test. Lindsay Perez, everyone knows who you are, and now you've got the fucking physical scar to prove it as well. So, I don't know. I think that would have been a cool ending to the franchise, but alas, we have a Saw 7. The reason is that Saw 7 was going to be the final one. I think originally they had 9 movies planned. They had like 3 trilogies planned. I guess it would have broke even with Star Wars, wouldn't it? But this was the first Saw film of the franchise that didn't make 100 million. It only made 69 million. Budget of 11, and it only made 69, despite actually being one of the best Saw films, which is a shame. But around that time, 2009, was also the year of Paranormal Activity. And as I mentioned earlier, that was a phenomenon, especially in the horror genre, the found footage thing. Everyone went nuts over that movie at the time. Those were also an annual release. And I think people had just got a little bit burnt out of the Saw films. Maybe they just got a little bit too samey. And Paranormal Activity was something a bit new for folks to chew on. So, yeah, and releasing it at the same time as that, unfortunately, that did take a hit. And Lionsgate and Twisted Pictures and the production companies probably saw that, and it's like, oh, audiences are finally tuning out. Right, we've got to wrap this shit up. So Saw 7 was put into production. Saw the Final Chapter, or Saw 3D, as it was listed as. And it's a shame, because if they did have a plan for 9 movies, if they did have a story plan, and you can kind of see that there's threads in this one which really don't get tied up, and this one feels very rushed and feels like, oh, we gotta tie everything up, and like, fuck it, like, it doesn't make any sense, just get it done. So yeah, it's a bit of a shame. Did I do my favourite trap from Saw 6? Yeah, I guess the carousel trap is my favourite one from that, in case I didn't mention it. Seaward Man says, love all the paranormal films. Brinsley, the first Paranormal Activity is a banger, to be fair. I really enjoyed found footage movies. Off topic. No, it's not off topic. No, we're talking about it. I must admit that I did go and see the Paranormal Activity. I think I went to see the first 4 Paranormal Activity films, believe it or not, in the cinema. And although I'm not too keen on the films, I've never gone back and rewatched them. They were among the most entertaining movie-going experiences of my life. Packed out screening, went with my best mate. We were just ripping the shit out of those movies. Like, we were talking all the way through, like, we didn't care. Everyone was like, you know, there were couples that had gone there, and the girls were all like really, like, they were really jumpy, and the guys were going like, and like trying to make people jump. Like, in those bits where you anticipate something happening, they'd go like, and like scare everyone and scare all the girls and stuff. It was a good time. The first 3 especially were really fun. The 4th one was just a bag of shit, to be honest. And then I never saw. They did the Ghost. Oh, what was it called? They did like a spin-off one. It was like set in Mexico or something. They did that one, and then they did the Ghost Key, and then did they do like Paranormal? I don't even know what it was called. But like the last 2 or 3 I never watched. So I know there was some like weird parallel dimension time travel thing they introduced or something, wasn't it, in the 5th one or the 6th one? Anyway, we are on to our next one now. Let's try and get this done in a relatively timely fashion. Oh, I haven't practiced enough piano and I've got my lesson tomorrow. God help me. Saw 3D, or Saw the Final Chapter. First off, what the fuck is going on with this poster? There's a bunch of different posters for Saw 3D. There's the one that's kind of the sculpted head of Jigsaw, and it's kind of breaking apart in 3D. And then you got this one. It's like a fucking music concert. You got helicopters bringing in parts, and they're building a statue. Like, what the fuck? What is that? What the fuck is that? Oh, I'm going to take that off screen. It's weird to look at. Yeah, not too keen on the poster for this one. And indeed, I'm not too keen on this film. Saw the Final Chapter is my least favourite of the main 7. Since Jigsaw and Spiral. Oh god, I'm gonna have to rank them by the end, but this one's low. This one's so low, and it just feels like it was a massive waste of opportunity of all the things they could have done. And by the end of it, when you get the twist of this film, it just felt like it went for the lowest common denominator. Like they just found a fan, like a fan fiction article on Reddit or something, and just said like, oh yeah, let's do that for the ending. And it doesn't make any sense, and it's oh god, right, let's dismantle this thing. Saw 3D. I still wasn't old enough to go and see a Saw film, but I was 1 year away. Goddammit. And could you believe the year that I could have gone to see a Saw film was when they stopped it, was when they stopped the franchise. So I would have been 17 when Saw 3D came out. And I was thinking like, oh, if they'd have just made another one next year, I could have gone to have seen it when I turned 18. And yeah, I didn't. I do remember what my first 18 was though at the cinema. I think it was weirdly enough, before I turned 18, there was a shit ton of films that I really wanted to watch at the cinema that were an 18. All of the Saw films, Sweeney Todd, Watchmen, all of these films I wanted to see at the cinema, and there was a bunch of other ones as well. But when I actually turned 18, there was like nothing I wanted to see at all. And I think part of that is maybe because ratings have decreased. Like, you can get away now with a lot more with a 15 rated certificate, hell, even with a 12A certificate, than you could years and years ago. Something that was probably like an 18 back in the day might even get like a 12, or probably like a 15 at least. But you can definitely get away with a lot more now. And I think Django Unchained was the first one, was my first 18 film that I went to see. Interestingly enough. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, but Saw 3D, fuck me. When did I first watch this film? My uncle had it on DVD, but I felt like I watched it before. I probably watched this was probably like a pirate again. I think I probably watched it, but probably a better quality copy now by the time that this film rolled out in like 2010. Maybe, I'm not sure. But I know I watched it. I did watch it for a second time on DVD, and it was still just as bad then. This film is just awful. Let's talk the 3D. So right from the off, the gimmick of 3D. 2010, 3D was big. The year before, you'd had Avatar, which was massive, and kind of made 3D resurrect itself. It's interesting, 3D's a weird thing where you'll have like a massive craze of 3D, where every single film will be in 3D, and then people will lose interest and it will drop off for years and you won't get anything. And then all of a sudden a film will come out and it'll come back. You know, in the 80s, 3D horror films were really big. You know, you had Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D, My Bloody Valentine in 3D, and all these Jaws 3D, all these gimmicky films, right? And that's when 3D's at its best, when it's gimmicky. But this is where you had films that were converted in 3D. You had Clash of the Titans in 2D or 3D and all these options, and all of this stemmed from Avatar the previous year, so I've got to have a feeling that that's one of the reasons that they chose to do Saw in 3D. And because 3D tickets were more pricey, so they get to make more money off the back end of it. And this one did clear 100 million again. It was done on a budget of, let's just see, 17 mil for this one, and it made 136. So the fact that it was the final chapter probably got asses in seats. People wanted to see how this thing was going to end. But there is barely anything I like in this movie. First and foremost, oh, sorry, we've got some comments. Let me just have a look. Let's just see. Brinsley says it goes down. Oh, he's talking about Paranormal Activity. It goes downhill as they go along. There was a ghost dimension or something. Yeah, that was it. Bath time. Oh my god, maybe it's Chris, maybe it's Maybelline. Love it. Let's see. When is the Hitchcock 3D film? Is it Dial M for Murder? I actually can't remember Bath Time. I don't think I've seen that one. I've got a Hitchcock collection of films, and I've only seen a handful of his films. I really do need to watch some more. It also stops piracy in it. Yes. Yes, it does. Spy Kids 3D is one of the best 3D films. I've got that on DVD, and I've still got the red and blue glasses with it. So that was a really good 3D film. The gimmicky stuff. That's when 3D is at its best. People go, oh no, I like the immersive stuff where the background looks like it's in the background and the foreground stuff looks like it's in the foreground. It's like, motherfucker, I can tell that the background's in the background when I watch a 2D film. I want some shit flying out of the screen at me. But I don't know. With Saw, it was just like really fucking bad. And more importantly, like when it's at the cinema, yeah, you can go and see it in 3D. But when it's released, it's pretty much going to be in bog standard. Like, I don't think they released a 3D Blu-ray of this when it was released. Like, they did that with some films where you could get like a 3D version, but most TVs didn't support 3D, and most people don't have access to that at home media. So what might be entertaining and a fun gimmicky experience in the cinema, when you get it on home video, it's just absolutely pointless. So when you watch this film in 2D, which most people will, it looks fucking diabolical. The gimmicky shit is really terrible and egregious, and you can always tell certain scenes were filmed, and the CGI on the 3D shit looks really bad. But mostly it's the color palette of this one. The color correction, it's filmed in this, it's almost like there's a haze over the screen, and everything's really bright, and it looks really fake and unnatural lighting. And I'm guessing that's because with 3D films you have to film it at a brighter contrast, because then when you put the glasses on, it's going to dim everything down. So maybe if you do watch this film in 3D, the color palette of the film does look like the other Saw films that came before, the quite dark and dingy looking thing. But without it, you've got this kind of, it's almost like someone smeared Vaseline over the camera lens. That's the only way I can describe it. Everything's in this kind of like weird, bright, hazy tint to it. And it looks really, really bad. The blood looks really bright and fake and theatrical blood, because again, when you've got the glasses on, it probably makes it look like darker. It makes it look a bit more realistic, but you ain't going to watch it on that. So you've got, I don't know. What I'm saying is it just looks really cheap. And I'm guessing that's all to do with the 3D or the cameras they were using for it or whatnot. It was just really, really fucking bad. So I already hate the look of this film. Let's get into this film. So we pick up right after the ending of Saw 6, and I didn't mention, but Betsy Russell, she's hot in like a kind of hot soccer mum kind of way, I guess. But she is an atrocious fucking actress. And I think YMS kind of said it the best in that she plays every scene like she's in like a kind of sexy movie, like a porn film. She's like, oh, I'm in danger, and she's always trying to look pretty in every scene. Like, you don't buy anything. She's not a good dramatic actress. You don't believe she's in peril, and she's always trying to like look hot, and I don't know. But the only reason she's in the film is literally because she was engaged to one of the producers, I think, and he got her in the movie. That's literally the reason why. But when she's acting alongside Tobin Bell, Jesus Christ, he is just acting rings around her, and it's so bad, and I feel so bad for him. Like, you could have got like a really good actress to stand toe to toe against Tobin Bell, and you pick her, Betsy Russell. It's like this vacuous fucking soccer mom. Yeah. I'll just read you guys' comments. Bath Time says, I was sick this week and watched Ahsoka. I really liked the 3D in Prometheus with a star map. Oh yeah, I remember. I think I went to see Prometheus in 3D. I'm not sure. Spy Kids 3D. Weird flex. It's the best kind of flex. What are you talking about? It's a great film. Speaking of which, there's a 5th Spy Kids film coming out this year. Did you know that? I didn't know that, but apparently there is. I honestly think 3D is a gimmick, so it doesn't excite me, but I watch a 3D Alien movie. Brinsley says, very attractive older lady, but not the best acting. Yeah. And she made her bread and butter through sort of like raunchy teen comedies in the same kind of vein that you'd have like Porky's or American Pie or something like that. She kind of started off in films like that, where she was just playing like the scantily clad, airheaded high school girl kind of thing, you know what I mean, like those kind of films. And let's just say her acting range hasn't really got anywhere from that. Like, essentially she probably just got the gig on this because she gave the fucking producer a blowy or something, and that's the reason that she's in there. And it shows. Yeah, and she wants immunity. We get introduced to this new detective as well, and it's like, why are we introducing another new detective character at this point in the story? There's really no need. And they try and show us a flashback with Hoffman to kind of cement him in the greater law, and he's terrible as well. There's a scene where he's interrogating Jill, and he's like, I always knew you were crazy. You're crazy than a sack full of cats, crazy lady. Crazy. I always knew you were crazy. And it's I'm like, what is this screenplay? Who is this character? He's terrible. All of it's awful. And none of it matters anyway, because, again, Hoffman takes out an entire second police precinct with an automated machine gun turret. Okay. When did he set that up? Sure. Right. Okay. And then he kills everyone in the police precinct as well. He's just like fucking snapping necks. He's like Metal Gear Solid snaking his way through the police precinct and just murdering everyone. It goes nuts. It just goes way off the deep end. The traps in this one as well. The main narrative flow is another new character who's introduced. Who's what's his name? Bobby. Who's made a name for himself and made a small fortune on releasing a self-help book, in that he was a Jigsaw survivor, and he's formed a Jigsaw survival group. And there's a couple of faces in there that you recognise from some of the traps in like Saw 5 and Saw 6 and whatnot, but there's no one to write home about, because there really aren't that many survivors in all of these Saw films, because you're just watching people lined up to die. But one of those survivors is the return, right from the opening scene actually, is Dr. Gordon. Cary Elwes is back. Of all the films he returns back to, it's Saw 7, Saw 3D, the final chapter. And he's acting totally villainous right from the off. We see how he survived the trap, how he survived cutting his foot off at the beginning. He cauterizes it on a steaming pipe. But then as soon as he's introduced at the self-help group, you're like, this guy's going to be evil. Because he's talking like Jigsaw. He's talking in like a really low, raspy voice. He's walking with a cane now, and he's just really menacing. But I watch these films for the story, and I'm thinking like, okay, well, what happened to Dr. Gordon's family? How did they explain his absence? Did he ever reunite with his daughter? What happened there? Is he still working as a physician? You know, like all of these questions. And the filmmakers don't give a shit about that. They don't care about tying any of that stuff up. Did he get back to his family and whatnot? Because pretty much later on in the film, obviously when we find out that he's another Jigsaw apprentice, right after Saw 1, Jigsaw helped heal him back up and gave him a prosthetic leg. I don't know why Dr. Gordon would go along with that, because right at the end of Saw 1, he's like, you fucking bastard, I'll fucking kill you. When he thinks that Zepp is Jigsaw. And the fact that he's got his daughter, his wife and daughter tied up. So why all of a sudden is he like best pals with Jigsaw and he's sided with him? I'm going to get onto the ending later on and how it doesn't make any sense. And I really hate that Dr. Gordon ending, because it just felt so just easy. Everyone was talking about that online, and it's just like they went with the fan ideas. So it was, yeah. But you've got Bobby, who's basically a fraud, but it's another group dynamic, and it's a whole other series of traps, and it's like, fuck me, like, when were these made? You don't have much Tobin Bell in this film as well, which I think really hurts this one, especially because it's the final chapter, and the way that they try and integrate him is really laughably bad. It's the scene that a lot of people meme, and it's the bit where he's got the backwards baseball cap to try and make him look younger. And it's awful. He goes to like a book signing, and he says like, I know that you're a fake or whatnot, and that's it. But again, I just, a lot of the traps in this one, I don't know how they were prepared, because some of them just seem like they would be impossible to prepare. A couple of examples. You've got a scene where Bobby has to instruct his friend who's blindfolded on the opposite side of the room. They're in the rafters of this like big building in the ceiling, and there's a bunch of wooden beams laid across, and he's got to basically direct his friend who's blindfolded across all of these beams before he gets hung. And it's like, well, how did Hoffman set all of these up? How did he set all those wooden platforms up in the rafters? And also, why is he like? Why does Hoffman give a shit? Jigsaw tested him and fucked his face up. Why is Hoffman still kidnapping all of these people whilst also trying to get out of town? Like, just leave. Like, why are you putting Chester Bennington and his racist friends in like a really elaborate fucking Rube Goldberg machine of a car? This is just it's just terrible, and it's laughable. And the bit where the car like slams down and fucking minces the guy's head and then drives off, and it pulls the guy's jaw off and his arms, and then it slams into the guy in the garage door, and then Chester Bennington crashes and flies out the front. It's ridiculous. It's so over the top, and it's like, well, when did Hoffman have time to set all this shit up? Because he was kidnapped. Well, he put himself in a trap in Saw 4 to make it look like he'd been kidnapped, and then right after that he was into Saw 5 where he was killing Strom, and then right after that we're into Saw 6. By that time he was also setting the traps up and kidnapping the people for Saw 6, but he was also kidnapping and setting the people up for Saw 5, and then also he was doing this shit in Saw 7. It doesn't make any sense, and as I say, I'm not in it for the traps. I would have been quite happy if all of this film was plot. And even if you did want to have the Dr. Gordon ending, like, actually set that up and let's talk about his wife and daughter. Let's have a scene where we actually get to know what happened with Dr. Gordon. But yeah, the traps are crap. More traps that I don't understand how they... Oh, and yeah, sorry, I got taken off it. The whole rafter things. The guy just wakes up on the edge. I'm like, if he just took one step forward and he just fell off and fell to his death straight away... There is no trap. There is no scenario there. There's another one which is a pretty grisly trap, but doesn't really make any sense when you think about it, where there's a woman who's got a like a fish hook on a long thread, like down in like a fucking stomach tract or something. And Bobby's got to slowly pull this out. And it's really horrible to think about, this like hook like fucking ripping her insides as it's coming out. She's like coughing blood and shit. But if she screams, if there's volume, then these spikes go into her neck. So she's got to be quiet as this fish hook's getting ripped out of her esophagus. But it's like, how did that get down there? If you chloroform someone, how do you make her swallow this fish hook all the way down? Like, have you surgically opened like her neck, like, and put this thing in and then stitched her back up? Well, no, because there's no visible scars. So she needs to be alive to swallow. I don't get it. Doesn't make any sense. There's another one later on which really doesn't make any sense, where Bobby has to rip his teeth out. It's interesting to note, by the way, the Saw 3 poster had three teeth hanging up, but there are no teeth traps in it. It's interesting why that was on the poster. But we get teeth traps in this one, and apparently there are numbers to a combination to a safe or to a door he's got to get through. And he's got to rip his teeth out, which has got the number on there. But he's like he's got like pliers, and he's like going to town, like yanking this tooth out. But if someone had to take his tooth out to write the number on there to then put it back in, that tooth would be really loose anyway. So, do you know what? There's just traps in there where I'm like, I don't get how that's a thing. Right from the off, Bobby wakes up and he's in like an iron cage, and there's a bed of spikes underneath it. And I'm thinking, well, what if he didn't pass that? What if he didn't make the swing and get past the spikes, and he fell on the spikes and fucking died? Well, then none of the other traps happen. And it all boils down to, as well, he's got to try and get to his wife. And he's got to put himself in the same trap that he lied about in the first place, where he's basically got to perform the Sundance. He's got to insert 2 hooks into his pectoral muscles and hoist himself up to hit this lever or to get this key or whatever it is. His wife, totally innocent in all of this, unknowingly married this guy, believing he was a Jigsaw survivor. She didn't know. She like wasn't in on the whole scheme or anything like that. If she was, then maybe it would make the ending a bit more palatable. But she is totally innocent and ignorant to everything that her husband's done. And he does the trap, but then it doesn't work. And then she gets killed in this really horrible, mean-spirited way, where she gets sealed in like a fucking brazen bull and incinerated alive. And I'm just thinking, like, you're just killing an innocent woman there because she married someone she didn't know was a fake. Like, that's fucking horrible. Yeah, I just really hate that. And I'm like, okay, so if this is Jigsaw who's planned all these things out, why would he do that? What choice did she have? Like, she appreciated her life. It's not her fault. And also that last trap as well, you could get out. You could find a way around that in like 1,000,001 other ways. There's no reason he had to put it through his pec muscles. He could step on the hooks and hoist himself up. He's got jeans on, so you could put it through like the belt buckle or the bit where you thread the belt through in the jeans. Like, just hook it into that and hoist yourself up. It's ridiculous, but I really hate that. I don't know, the whole wife thing at the end, just, I don't know, it's the sentimentalist in me. It just really annoys me at the end. And she dies in like a really horrible, fucked up way as well. So I don't know. It just got to me at the end there with that. Oh shit! Read the comments. Sorry. Brinsley says it was good to see a few of the survivors coming back who made it. I think in Saw 2, Glover would have been the main character if all that hadn't have happened. Yeah, agreed. How do you do, fellow kids? Backwards caps always works. It's bedtime, Chris. Read the comments in it so we can brush our teeth. I've got 2 more films left, okay? But yeah, the Dr. Gordon thing at the end is just ridiculous. I hate it so much. It was utter fan service. The whole thing about... It was like straight up fan theories on the internet. The Venus flytrap with the eye, when you see the video and you see like Jigsaw approach him and do some scalpel, people were saying like, oh, well... Jigsaw isn't medically trained, so that's got to be a surgeon to do something like that. And if you look really closely, you can see him sort of like shamble and limp towards the table. That's got to be Dr. Gordon. And that was like theories dating all the way back to when fucking Saw 2 came out. And it just felt like they just went for the low-hanging fruit with that. It was just like, oh, what's a really easy ending to do? Oh, just bring Dr. Gordon back, and he's an apprentice, and he's working for Jigsaw, and he's like best pals with him now for some reason. Okay, yeah, great. There's also 2 other pig people that apprehend Hoffman at the end. And they're never revealed. We still don't know who those 2 pig people are. I think those would have been revealed in Saws 8 and 9, which they had planned, but I think they had to take the plot they had for 8 and 9 and kind of cram it and bookend it all off into Saw 7. But I think in the director's commentary, the original idea was there's a really terrible public trap at the beginning of the film I don't know how that was set up in broad daylight. I think it was to be all shocking, like, oh look, there's a saw trap that's not in like a dingy basement somewhere in an abandoned building. It's actually in broad daylight where people can see. But it's like, okay, well, who set that trap up? If it was Hoffman, okay, well, how did he get himself into a department store in broad daylight to set all this elaborate contraption up? Makes no sense. But the 2 guys that there's basically a love triangle trap. They have to decide whether to kill one of the other guys or whether to kill the woman who's been using both of them. The 2 pig people were meant to be those guys at the beginning, basically. I think that's in the director's commentary. So you've got Dr. Gordon and those 2. I don't know if those 2 were just randomly hired. I don't know if they just decided to join and become a... And here's the thing, like, I don't know if Hoffman always knew that Dr. Gordon was an apprentice, or if he's just as shocked as we are at the end that he's there. And he locks Hoffman in the bathroom and he says game over, and he throws the saw in 3D towards the camera, and that's it, and Hoffman gets sealed in there. Now, whether Saw 10 is going to have well, I've heard there is a post-credit scene. Whether we're going to cut to that bathroom and Hoffman's going to have escaped the bathroom, and then when we get a Saw 11, it's going to be another sequel. That could be cool. But yeah, Saw 3D, I can't stand. I hate everything about it. It's terrible. It's awful. And to me, Saw 6 is the ending of this franchise. Interesting to note as well, Jill Tuck gets killed. She gets put in the reverse bear trap, which actually goes off. Don't know whether I like the idea that Jill Tuck gets killed at the end, because Jigsaw was trying to save her life, but I guess it does clean up shop. I just don't get why Hoffman's doing any of this at this point. It's like, what have you got to prove? Why are you still doing traps and carrying on a legacy for someone who put you in a trap and tried to test you? I don't get it. Favorite trap of the movie? I can't say the bathroom trap again, can I? At the end, I've already said that one from Saw 1. Oh, they're all terrible. I guess the fishhook one is the grisliest one and the one that makes me kind of squirm the most. But then I also think, as I mentioned, like how did he get the hook down her throat? The one where he's instructing the guy across the beams is quite an interesting one, like a team dynamic one. But it doesn't. None of them make any sense. I'll say the fishhook one. I don't know. I'm going for broke with Saw 3D. I really fucking hate it. Let's move on. Let's move on from that one. So, I finally turned 18 the year after Saw 3D came out, and there was no Saw movie. And there was no Saw movie for a considerable amount of time. In fact, I thought that was it for Saw. I thought we'd never get another one. Flash forward to 2017, many, many years later, and we have the resurrection of the franchise in the guise of Jigsaw, which is the 8th installment in the franchise. Let me just bring it up real quick. That's not the one I wanted. Boom, there we go. Jigsaw. Yeah, we got quite a lot of viewers tonight. Not everyone's sounding off in the comments. I know that. We got Brinsley, we got Bath Time, we got SeaWorld Man. I don't know if Carl is still around, but he joined us earlier. But yeah, if you're watching, join in the conversation. We've got two left. Let's get this done. Brinsley says it's kind of a dumb twist with Dr. Gordon at the end, but I just roll with it at this point. Yeah, you know, the Hello Zep theme kicks in and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. I suppose. But yeah, so this was directed by the Spearig brothers. I think I've actually ever seen anything else they've done apart from this one. And I was excited for this one. I don't think like hype was ridiculous, but Tobin Bell was coming back. It was another Saw movie. This was going to pick up however many years after the original Saw film. I think it's like 10 years after, isn't it? They've set it in the timeline or something like that, I think it is. And it was the first Saw film that I could go and see in the cinema, which was a massive deal. So I got my two best buddies from school, the ones, you know, that were into the franchise all the way throughout our school lives. I said, we're going to go and see this Saw movie, and it's going to be the first one we get to see in the cinema together. And we went, and the film was really bad. I really didn't like Jigsaw. It was really kind of boring and forgettable, and honestly, I don't think I'm going to be talking about this one for very long, because I don't remember much of it. That being said, though, and this goes for all the Saw films, apart from Saw 3D, did I have a good time with it? Yeah, like, I see these out of obligation. They're good escapism films for me, and I think it's because I have so much nostalgia tied to them. I think that's why I'm always going to turn up for them. I find them entertaining. When that Hello Zep theme kicks in, I'm like, oh shit, here we go, let's do this. I love that it's dumb. I love that it doesn't make any sense and it's really convoluted now, but there's still like a pang of me deep inside where I'm like, oh, I love this really deep interconnected story and things like that. So this film, similar to oh, hang on, let me move that there. This film, similar to Saw 2 and Saw 4. Saw 7 uses one of these twists. We have the new apprentice twist, and we have the something is happening at a different time than what we think it is. We think it's happening in the present, and it turns out, oh no, it actually isn't. It's happened many, many years ago. Yeah, Brinsley doesn't remember much about this too, so I was going to hope that you could kind of help me through this one, but we'll try and get through it. So I was interested by this one because it was picking up 10 years later, and it was, you know, these copycat things are happening again. And I thought that's kind of an interesting way to go about it. So I was like, so this is basically going to be a soft reboot of the franchise. I was like, well, how are you going to bring Tobin Bell in there? Are you just going to use his voice? You know, I want to play a game. And that's it. That's the only way that you're going to bring him in. But they found a way to bring him in. But it does muddy the waters of the continuity and the overall chronology. Because we go way back with this one. We go back to like the starting days of Jigsaw. And it's kind of this this thing that's running in tandem. So we have a bunch of bodies being discovered. Whilst we're discovering these bodies, we're also intercutting with all of these traps that are happening, and we're to believe that all of the bodies that we're finding are the remains of all the people in the traps that we're seeing. But it turns out at the end that all of the traps that we've been seeing in the film happened years ago, and the bodies that we're seeing now are copycat corpses done to look like the ones from years ago. It's a very strange concept because the bodies from that first series of the traps that we're seeing in the film that happened years ago, no one ever discovered those bodies. So we've got a copycat killer who's copycatting victims that have still never been discovered. So how is that going to leave an impact? I don't know. It's a strange idea. And we get another new apprentice in the form of what's his name? Logan Nelson, who was placed in the original trap many years ago by Jigsaw because he labeled John's X-rays wrong, which led to his cancer going undiscovered for a long time. And Jigsaw put him in a trap because he was like, "Fuck this guy. He's terrible at his job. He probably appreciates life, but he did a piss poor job." And again, it was personal, which is interesting because, you know, Jigsaw says in Saw 5, it can never be personal. You can't just put people in traps based out of a sense of revenge or anything like that. You have to be completely emotionally detached from what you're doing. You're of like a higher purpose, basically, which is really funny because the plot for this new Saw 10 is all about revenge and personal revenge on people that have wronged him. And on the poster, the tagline is Jigsaw's most personal game yet, and yet in Saw 5 he said it can never be personal, so they've already fucked it. Yeah, and then when the anesthetic when the chloroform didn't wear off, and he was still unconscious as the trap was activated and he felt like he didn't have a fair shot at it, John Kramer rushes in because also he thought that actually no, on second thought it was an honest mistake. He didn't mean to label my X-rays wrong, so maybe I was a little bit hasty there. So he rescues him, he dresses his wounds. Again, it's the Dr. Gordon thing. He dressed his wounds, he brought him back to full health, and then he kind of brought him into the fold. But Logan Nelson is apparently his first ever apprentice. I think Logan was a military man as well, and he had like a lot of PTSD, and he had a lot of demons, and like John Kramer helped him through them, apparently. So at the end, if we go in with the Saw lore, there's another apprentice out there in the form of Logan Nelson. And yeah, he's been around since day one, since before Dr. Gordon, since before Amanda and Hoffman. This guy was kicking, so I don't know if this guy remains a secret, if the others know about him. That's really all I have to say on Jigsaw. I really don't have much. The traps in this one could easily have been avoided. There's leaps in logic as well. It's like, oh, well, if that floorboard didn't break, then that trap wouldn't have been activated, and then this couldn't happen. There's loads of things that just don't add up with all these traps, and the traps just don't really stand out to me in this one. There's one that's like a kind of drill. This guy sold a faulty motorbike to John Kramer's nephew, and John Kramer's nephew died in an accident because the brakes wouldn't work on this bike. So there's this drill that he gets lowered into, and he has to pull this brake in the middle, and the machine gets stopped temporarily as he's right next to the brake, but he chooses to spend the time celebrating when he could just literally hit the brake and get out of there, and of course it turns him to mincemeat. There's one where there's 3 injectors, one's filled with an antidote, one's filled with saline, and one's filled with acid, and they've got to decide who injects who with what. There's one where a guy's got to cut like his leg off for something to save someone. I don't know, the traps are just... And then there's like another decapitation one, which is exactly the same as Saw 5, really. So the traps are just really uneventful in this one. Like I just really don't care for the traps. And then you've got the really over the top laser one. It's like the shotgun collar that Lynn Denlin's in, but it's got like these fucking futuristic laser beams that just burn through anything. And then yeah, at the end, Logan's kind of created an alibi for himself, and he's framed another detective, and yeah, this laser thing goes off and kills the other detective, and the CGI is so bad. Like the laser, I mean, it would kill you instantly, which is great. So the lasers like phase through his head, and then you see his like body drop to its knees, and like blood hit the floor. And I would have cut the scene there, but then they like, well, you've got to see his head fold apart, and then we cut to this really shitty CGI rendered head that kind of all unfolds like a flower that looks like the Demigorgon from Stranger Things, and it looks awful. It looked awful then, and I watched it recently. It looks even worse now, and that's kind of it for Jigsaw. Was it cool seeing Tobin Bell back? Yeah, but there's a lot of things that really don't make any sense. The fact that all of this is meant to take place before the first Saw film, and that, you know, that was 2004, but you've got modern technology in it in the flashback scene. Like I think YMS mentioned this in one of his videos as well. There's like plasma screens in it, like full HD plasma screens, yet people are using like fucking pagers and VCRs in 2004. So there's a lot of shit that doesn't make sense. It muddies the waters, and it completely ruins the well, there's a lot of things that have already kind of convoluted and don't make any sense in the Saw franchise, but this just kind of adds to that. And the fact that we haven't even gone back to it. You know, the next one, Spiral, is something completely different from this one. We haven't followed up on Logan or any more Saw films or continuing Jigsaw's legacy. And then the new one, as far as we know, Saw 10, you know, it's just set in between Saw 1 and Saw 2, so it's completely removed from this time period. Whether the post-credit scene is going to go back to the stuff with Logan, but I don't know. I can't imagine it will. And how many did it make? A lot of money. It made over 100 mil again, 104 mil. So I guess the time was right for another Saw film. It got people's attention. But yeah, that's all I have to say on Jigsaw. If I'm gonna go for a favorite trap in this one, I'd probably just say the laser beam one, just because it's the only one that sticks out in my mind. It's ridiculous and it's totally futuristic, but it's the only one that's kind of got a slightly memorable aesthetic to it, I guess. Let's just see. Brinsley says yes, and another secret apprentice we don't know about. Yeah, it really doesn't make sense when you think about it. I don't mind getting Spiral spoilers. Okay, well, yeah, we're moving on to the next one. We've gone for 3 hours tonight, guys. Christ almighty, we've gone way over double what I thought this was going to be. But we've got a decent view count on it. This is awesome, and I enjoy talking about Saw. So here we go. Let's get this last one done. We're basically on to Saw 9 now, aren't we? Which I guess we've got. It's technically not a Saw film, but I guess it is because we're on to Saw 10, so this would be Saw 9. But we are at Spiral, or Spiral from the Book of Saw, which is its official title, which is a terrible name. I'm like, when was Saw ever a book? It's craziness. So, Spiral, 2021, only a couple of years ago. I think this came out around lockdown, didn't it? I think, or it was when we were all released back into the wild, which is very nice of the government. And yeah, I went to see Spiral. I was ready for another Saw film. Oh, hang on, we've got a new comment. We've got the English Scotsman saw Spiral on Netflix last Halloween. What did you think of it, man? Yeah, let me know. So yeah, 2021, there was a fair gap again, like the gap from Saw the Final Chapter up to Jigsaw. We had quite a considerable gap again from Jigsaw up to this one. So it was always like they were trying to find their footing. They were trying to reinvent the Saw franchise. They didn't really know how to go about it. So Jigsaw's trying to do its own thing. It's set 10 years later. You've got a copycat killer, but then it ties into the original films with Tobin Bell, and you've got another apprentice. And I thought, okay, so you can flesh out the lore and you can continue it on with this new apprentice, and you can maybe still bring Jigsaw back into it, and maybe you can bring Dr. Gordon back into it, and we can tie all of these apprentices together and really push on throughout the franchise. Does Dr. Gordon know of Logan and all these other apprentices, or is he like a secret apprentice? I really don't know. I can't keep track of all this shit. And then you got Spiral, which was an idea that Chris Rock had, and he probably brought it to the studio. But he wanted to branch out into the horror genre, didn't he, Chris Rock? And yeah, he had an idea. I think he helped worked on the screenplay as well, or maybe just the story. But apparently, like, when I heard it was like, and Chris Rock has come up with an idea for a new Saw film, but it's not going to be a Saw film. It's going to be called Spiral, but it's still going to tie into the Saw films, but it's going to be its own thing. I was like, what is this movie? And that's kind of my biggest criticism of this film, is that it really doesn't know what it wants to do. It's trying to be another Saw film, but then it's taking so much of a step away from the Saw films that it doesn't feel like an authentic Saw film, but then it doesn't have enough of an identity of its own to be its own thing. So it's this kind of awkward in between that's just really forgettable and boring to me. Did I have a good time going to see it? Yeah, because it was kind of like another Saw film, but the lack of Tobin Bell, the new villain, just really didn't have any kind of presence in the film for me. And also I just thought Chris Rock was just really terrible. Chris Rock excels at comedy. That's what he does. And there's moments in the film where you can tell he's kind of going off on like an improv shtick with whatever it is he's doing, which I guess kind of works. But I'm watching it thinking, am I watching a comedy here then? Because Chris Rock's in there. Is this meant to be like a piss take of the Saw franchise? Because that's what I thought when I saw the initial news on it. That's what I thought it was. I thought it was like a Mickey take, a pastiche of the Saw films. But then, right from the beginning, after his character's been introduced and he's done like all the wisecracking stuff, he just kind of plays it really straight and serious, and I don't know, it just takes the wind out of it for me. He's just a really kind of boring protagonist character that doesn't really have an identity of his own. But the English Scotsman likes it. He says it's a refreshing change of scenery for the series. It is shot very well, I'll say that. It's got a unique look to it, and we should mention as well, Darren Lynn Bousman returning to direct as well after directing Saws 2, 3 and 4, came back to direct this one, so I remember being excited for that one, that he was back. Charlie Clouser doing the music again, so it does have that uniform feel to it, I guess, but it's just kind of boring. It doesn't really do anything new with the franchise that we haven't seen already, and it's just the new characters I didn't think were that interesting, and the traps as well. The traps are probably a lot better than Jigsaw. They're probably a little bit more inventive than that one, but I just thought they were really unfair in this one. I don't think they had enough time for half of these traps. There's one trap, for example, where a guy's in like a tank that's filling with water, and there's a copper wiring, and obviously when the water reaches a certain level it will electrocute him to death, and the only way he can get out of it is that he has to bite down on this device, and he's got like these things tied to his fingers, and it's going to drag him out of the pool, and it's going to tear his fingers off. And he's doing it, like he's actually doing it, and it's tearing his fingers, but this motor's going really, really slow. And what's really annoying is when the tape is playing and explaining the rules of the game, the water's already filling up the tank. And I just think that's not fair. Like, let the tape play out and then like let the games begin, boom, and then the tap can start filling up. But it happens during the tape, which I thought is just really unfair. And the guy's doing it at like 30 more seconds he would have done it, but just giving a guy a minute and this thing's just being really slow to tear his fingers off and it still electrocutes him. I thought, that's not fair. Give him a bit of extra time, he would have done that. You've got the tongue trap at the beginning where someone's got to either bite their tongue off or cut their tongue off, and they're suspended in front of a subway tunnel, and if he doesn't do it in like, again, it's a minute, I think. If he doesn't do it in 60 seconds, the train will hit him. But I'm watching this thing thinking, like, if you cut your tongue off, you will bleed to death. If you don't get immediate medical attention, you will bleed to death. That, or you will pass out from loss of, from blood loss or just from the pain. So you'll probably pass out on the train track anyway and get hit by the train no matter what. Or the level that he had to cut this tongue off, it would probably do irreparable damage to your lower jaw as well. So you'd be fucked up. You bleed to death anyway, regardless. So unfair trap there. There's another one as well that's, the trap takes place in the police precinct in cold storage, and it's like the police chief, and she's like strapped down to this table, and there's a blade as she's laying down. There's like a blade at the base of her neck. She's got to sever her own spinal cord by like just wiggling her neck on the back of this blade. She's got to sever her own spinal column, otherwise this boiling hot wax is basically going to like waterboard her, and she's going to like drown and burn to death on scalding hot liquid wax. And I was just watching this thinking, like, how the fuck did the villain set this up? in a police precinct in cold storage that people use. Like, how did he create? Did he bring it down bit by bit? Like, oh, hey, Dave, what you bought in today? Oh, it's just this huge, like, gear wheel thing. Oh, what do you need that for? I don't know, just bought it in today. I'm going to take it down to cold storage. And just, like, every single day he bought in another piece and put it all together. Ridiculous. There's another one that's, again, all these are shot very well. You know, it's got that Saw style to it, the cinematography-wise, but it's just, I don't care about the characters, and the plots just seem so disconnected to anything, but yet it's still trying to be a Saw film. It's weird. There's one where there's a guy who's suspended from, like, the ceiling, and there's this machine that shreds glass, and then it, like, fires all, like, the shards of glass out as shrapnel, and it's, like, just absolutely destroying his back, and Chris Rock's got to let him out. And then you've got, like, the final test scene, the final moment. But the twist for this one really fell flat for me, because they do something in the film which just immediately made me guess where it was going to go at the end. And I think that just kind of dismantled the ending a little bit for me. Chris Rock's partner in the film, there's a moment in the film where he goes off to like a meat packing place, or like a butcher's or something, I think it is. And then Chris Rock goes there and he finds a skinned body, like a flayed skinned body there. And he says, "Oh, it's my it's like my partner." And he's like really angry about that. But every other person that dies in the film, we see them die. But we didn't then, like, cut to a flashback of seeing what this trap is and how it flayed him. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's not going to be him, is it? That's going to be a body that he's used and flayed to pass off as himself, and he's going to be the villain. And it is. They kind of do a Billy the Puppet type character in this, but it's not the Billy the Puppet we know. It's this pig marionette puppet thing, and the voice just... You're expecting, like, oh, I want to play a game. And it's kind of like that, but it's just really weird. It's like, it's almost like an AI voice. It's like, hello, I want to play a game. And it's just, doesn't lack, it lacks the impact and the iconic sound of the Jigsaw thing. They do reference John Kramer, though, so it is in the world of Saw, from the book of Saw, as they say. And it's just like a copycat killer set 10 years after, or whatever it is. So and that's basically it. And then it ends where Samuel Jackson's in it. He plays Chris Rock's dad, and he's been kidnapped, and it's kind of like a Saw 4 situation where he's kind of like the Eric Matthews character, where he's suspended there and someone's going to come through the door, and if someone comes through the door, it's going to kill him. And that's basically what happens. That the villain of the film says, make a choice. You can either shoot this target, which means that your father will live, but I'll escape, or you can shoot me, but it means that your father's going to die. So Chris Rock shoots the target so that his dad can live, which then does lower him to the ground. But then the Hello Zep theme kicks in, and it's all part of the plan, and then this buzzer goes off, and it brings him up like a marionette puppet. And then this Assassin's Creed gun comes out of his wrist and points it at the door. So when the SWAT team break in, they think that Samuel Jackson's about to shoot them. So they open fire and they kill his dad anyway. And then the new killer, the new Jigsaw copycat killer, gets in the elevator and escapes. And that's where it cuts. And that's the end. That's the end of Spiral. As I say, the traps were probably better in this one than Jigsaw. If I was going to say what the best trap would be... Oh, God. I guess the finger trap's interesting. It's quite grisly seeing someone's fingers just get slowly torn off, and the sound effects are pretty grim. I guess I'd say that one, but I just think it's unfair with the timing in there. Yeah, I'd probably say that one. Visually, it looks kind of cool as well, with the water in the tank and the lighting, so I don't know. I'd go with that one, I think. And that brings us to the end. So, Saw 10 will be later this week. I've got my tickets booked for Friday night. I'm very excited to see it, so although the Saw franchise is a very turbulent one, and there's definitely some very good ones and there's some very bad ones, I accept all of the Saw films in some way, shape and form, even if they're really bad. I enjoy these films. They're a good escapism. They're entertaining to me. And they're genuinely, I make no bones about it. It's an important film franchise in my life growing up and my friendship groups, and we've all remained Saw fans, and it was great conversation and speculation and genuine hype for the next one to roll around each year and uncovering more about the story, and we were really into the story and these characters. So Saw 10, this is the premise. This isn't like the entire plot. This is the premise that can be found on Wikipedia. Weeks after the events of the original Saw film, John Kramer travels to Mexico after learning of a potential miracle cure for his terminal cancer. However, he soon realizes that the entire operation is a fraudulent scheme targeting vulnerable individuals. Finding a new purpose, the infamous serial killer and his apprentice abduct the con artists and subject them to a horrifying new series of traps. I'm going to be interested to see if this actually does lead into Saw 2. And maybe we hear about how he's setting the house trap up. But I did hear there's a post-credit scene. Whether the post-credit scene is going to snap us back to modern day and we'll see that Hoffman has escaped the bathroom. And then if they do another one, it's actually going to be post-Saw the final chapter. Or I've heard that maybe the post-credit scene is going to tie into another potential prequel film. Either both with Jigsaw and Amanda, but I've heard that it's going to focus on Amanda, so maybe it is that one I suggested earlier where it could be set in between Saw 2 and Saw 3, and we can really see how Amanda changes from that punk rock kind of girl in Saw 2 to the deranged psychopath that she is in 3. It seems like there's a lot of fertile ground. The one thing that is very noticeable in the trailer is that Tobin Bell and Shawnee Smith are remarkably older. Incredibly noticeably older. Tobin Bell is 81 years old, for fuck's sake. So the very fact that this is meant to take place between Saw 1 and Saw 2 visually doesn't make any sense. So I don't know if someone could produce an edit where they could digitally de-age them a little bit, which might, make it flow a little bit better. But I'm going to try and put that from my mind. It will be noticeable, and I probably will bring that up in my review later on this week. But we're getting more Saw. We're getting another Saw film. I'm excited. We've got genuinely, I'm not even exaggerating when I say this is one of my most anticipated films of the year. It might even be John Wick 4 was my most anticipated, and that was alright, but I was a little bit let down by it. Mission Impossible 7 was my next most anticipated film of the year, and I was really let down by that too. I had a lot of problems with Mission Impossible 7. It's all on Saw 10. Everything rests on Saw 10's shoulders. 2023 has been one of the worst years in entertainment history, without a shadow of a doubt. In living memory, I can't think of a worse year for film than 2023. So Saw 10, this is going to be the one to do it. And then after that, we're getting into some cool territory. We've got the new Scorsese movie, Killers of the Flower. Was it Killers of the Flower Moon? Is it called the Leonardo DiCaprio one? So we should have some good stuff towards the end of the year, gearing up for Oscar season. But Saw 10. It's the battle of the two tens this year, isn't it? We had a Fast X, and now we've got Saw X. So yeah, should be good. Let me just finish with your guys' comments, and then we'll round off tonight because I still have some piano to do, and also need to be up at 8 o'clock in the morning. Brinsley says, I haven't seen Spiral, but I guess I appreciate them trying something different at least, but not sure how it would rank in the series. Oh, I need to finish with my ranking as well, don't I? I didn't rank the movies. I'll do that in a second. I'm looking forward to Saw X, more so now that I'm aware of the post-credit scene. Yeah, should be interesting. I don't know where they're going to go with it, but that's cool. They're doing a Marvel, aren't they? Jigsaw will return. Brinsley says, thanks for the long stream, Chris. Would be interested in more horror videos, not just franchises, but anything really. I'll definitely check out Saw X out, but I'm not in a rush. Really may wait for streaming. Hey, that's fair enough, man. But as I say, I will be reviewing it later this week, so I will be going into spoilers probably. There'll be a spoiler-free section though. Right, I'm going to finish on a real quick ranking of these films. So, My least favorite to favorite. Oh God, I'm sorry guys. I know we've got some people in the comments right now that really enjoy it and thought it was a breath of fresh air, but I will probably have Spiral at my least favorite. It was the one that left the least impact on me. I think it's the least connected to the story, and it just kind of fell flat for me. The characters and the acting, and I just really didn't care for it. So I'd have Spiral at the bottom. Next one up after that, probably Jigsaw. Yeah, again, it just seems like a pointless story. It's convoluted the lore too much. It's cool seeing Tobin Bell back, but I just really didn't care for it. It's just not memorable. Like that's just the main thing. It's just totally forgettable. After that, I'd have Saw 3D. I hate it, but you know, you've got Hoffman in there, you've got Gordon in there, you've still got Jill Tuck in there, and it is still continuing that main thrust, that main line of the Saw films. It just does it in a really piss poor way, and I hate the direction they did, and I hate all the traps. I never even mentioned that weird dream sequence trap where Jill Tuck imagines that she's getting killed by Hoffman with the go-kart trap, which looks like absolute hot garbage. Yeah, I hate Saw 3D. So Jigsaw and Spiral are better made movies than Saw 3D, but I guess if I'm just going favourites, then, you know, I'd probably be there. After Saw 3D, I would have Saw 5. It's a film in two halves for me. I like the flashback sequence stuff with Jigsaw and Hoffman and developing Hoffman's story, but I hate the trap stuff, and I think it's acted really poorly, and there was definitely a dip in quality with Saw 5. It was the first one that I actually really didn't care for when I first watched it. After Saw 5, I would go... Saw 4, I think, next. Not a bad film, but it didn't blow me away by any stretch of the imagination. I just feel it's light on character, and I really don't like how the ending is that Rig failed because he beat the timer, and he needed to take some time off work and he didn't, and therefore he doesn't appreciate life. So I don't like that bit, but I don't mind 4. It's very watchable. After 4, I'd probably go Saw 2. I like the group dynamics interesting, but I don't feel like the characters are interesting, and I feel that the only character that is interesting is Obi, and he's the one I want to learn more about, and he's the one that is killed straight away. So, but I do really like the Tobin Bell stuff, and it was the first one that really started to flesh the character out, and we get to see the inner workings of his mind and his motives and everything. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I thought, considering it was made 1 year after the original Saw, that they did propel it in a pretty cool way. Then I would probably go Saw 3. Some good dramatic stuff towards the end with Amanda and Jigsaw. It did feel very conclusive, at least at the time we thought it did. Loads of traps in there if that's your thing. And I guess you could say it does kind of mark an end of the trilogy a little bit with that. It does go a bit OTT with the traps, and I've been more in it for the story. So I guess I latch on to more of the acting with Tobin Bell, with that like father and daughter dynamic with him and Amanda, and how he really wants to see her do right by herself. Second favourite, I would say Saw 6. It's been a while since I've watched it, but I think it's a really entertaining film. I think Kevin Groider absolutely nailed the directing of it. It's the first one that actually made me have any kind of sense of pathos with some of the victims in the traps, especially at the carousel trap. I thought that was very well done. And the Hoffman stuff, tying it all together, the ending with the reverse bear trap is incredible. It's one of the best Saw endings, and I honestly think they could have ended the franchise at that one. I genuinely believe that. I think that would have been a really cool ending shot for the franchise. And then my number one favourite is the original Saw. It stands on its own. It was never designed to have loads of sequels. It was made on a shoestring budget, and it's launched this entire legacy. I will never forget the first time that I watched it. The ending absolutely blew my socks off. My jaw was just hanging open in total disbelief for about an hour after I finished watching it. And it introduces everything. It's got the Saw theme. It's got the whole crux of everything, and it felt very different. After that, I eventually watched 7, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, you can see some inspiration there from that movie when it comes to Saw. but it felt fresh, and people took to it. And that's why we're still talking about Saw now, and it all stemmed from that first one. There is some really terrible acting in there, but it kind of adds to the cheesy humour to it, I guess, the tongue-in-cheek nature of it. But I think it's still effective, and I think it's like a genuinely good like horror thriller film. I still enjoy the original Saw film. Okay, I am all talked out. 3.5 hours, my guys. Jesus Christ. There's so much stuff that I needed to get done tonight, and I'm going to try and get it done now. Oh, God, pray for me. But I just want to say a big thank you to everyone that's stayed and hear me prattle on about the Saw franchise for 3.5 hours. I did not know this was going to go on for this long, but I thank each and every one of you for commenting. This has been great. I thought I was just going to be talking to a camera for myself the whole night, and I'm so glad that isn't the case. It's nice to see that there are so many Saw fans out there. We've had fun tonight, and it's been good reminiscing about this franchise. It's made me happy. It's made this Saw fan very, very happy. I'm glad that we got to talk about some horror films on the channel, and I will hopefully be bringing some more horror films to you at some point, whether it's franchises or one-offs, because there's a lot of ones that I need to watch, and Halloween is fast approaching, which is the perfect time to watch horror movies. So watch this space, I guess. But yeah, everyone, go get some sleep. It's 1:30 in the morning. What are you doing awake? Go, please. But thank you, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow. I will be live again tomorrow night for the new episode of Ahsoka, me and JX. So if that's your thing, if Star Wars is your thing, tune in tomorrow night. I will be back again. But